Welcome, everybody. This is the Jade and Jess podcast where we ask questions about religion, cults, and cash. Today, I'm doing my first interview, and I have John
Tucker.
Tucker?
Yeah.
Okay. Is your last name was Kingston and you changed it, or?
No, so my mom, when she got married, she was a Hanson, and she looked back in her ancestry line and found that we have Tuckers in our ancestry, and so
Okay.
she chose that name when she married my dad.
Gotcha. So, but your dad's a Kingston.
Yeah, my dad was Artel Kingston, and originally my mom married Eldon Kingston. He was the one that started the Kingston group.
Eldon Kingston started the group. Who's the prophet right now?
Right now it's Paul.
Paul.
And it's funny, they don't call him a prophet, they call him the man on the watchtower. And maybe because they never prophesy.
They don't call him a prophet.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Paul Eldon's son?
No, he's my brother. He's
your brother.
Yeah, my half brother from a different mom.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Is there somebody in between Eldon and Paul that was the prophet?
Yeah. So Eldon started the group in 1935. And
Okay.
He started with 2 wives. So his dad is Charles. Charles was a member of the LDS Church. And I think they started to get into talking to people like the Ogden Kraut and the Council of Friends, the people that the FLDS come from. And he started learning about polygamy and figured, oh my heck, we're doing something wrong in the LDS Church. And so he started teaching his kids this. And his son runs with it. He gets 2 wives before his dad even took another wife. And apparently my grandmother, his first wife, didn't like it at all, didn't want nothing to do with it. But the son Eldon decides that, this is what needs to happen. So he takes 2 wives. In 1935, he starts this order, this Kingston group, Davis County Cooperative Society. And then he gets cancer. He dies in 1948. But it's funny, he stayed a member of the LDS Church.
Okay.
Clear till 46, when they finally figured out he had multiple wives and was doing all this stuff, and booted him out.
Did he know anybody in that FLDS, the fundamentalist group? Like, during that time, it would have been Roy Johnson, it would have been John Y. Barlow, Joseph Musser. Did he know those guys, or?
So I don't think we're related necessarily, but he would talk to them. And he talked to, there's one, what was the guy's name? What is it? What's a few more of the names? The one
Joseph Musser was a prominent person but John Y. Barlow was considered the prophet.
Yeah.
I don't know. There were some Broadbents.
Yeah, Leslie Broadbent.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if Leslie Broadbent was a member of the Council of Friends or if he was still in the church helping them.
I think Leslie Broadbent was considered the prophet for a while at that time. The FLDS look back and don't consider him a prophet.
Okay.
But when Lawrence C. Woolley died, I think he was the senior apostle for 6 months, and then he died.
Yeah. Yeah, and so Leslie Broadbent is the one that my mom's first husband, Eldon, that's the one he went to, and he kind of like trying to decide if he should join with him or if they should join with him, with Eldon. And supposedly there's some dreams that Leslie Broadbent's wife had where it showed that Eldon was the one mighty and strong, but she refused to admit it.
Okay.
So...
Man,
kind of strange.
Yeah, the way people decide. Do you think Eldon was the type of guy that was truly sincere about polygamy, or was he more doing this just to have multiple wives? What kind of a person do you think he was?
I think he was a pretty sincere person. Everybody, he obviously died a long time before I was ever born, but everybody that I've talked to that knew him, they said he would give you the shirt off his back. He would do whatever. He was kind. He was considerate, and he didn't try and control people. He would say, you know what, if you choose to go to hell, then my job is to help you.
Okay.
And give him free agency.
Sure. It's interesting because a lot of these early leaders, I think a lot of people out in the world view them as people that just really wanted sex and power. From my experience and my personal relationships with the groups and different things like that, my view of them is that they're more sincere people, and they truly, most of them truly believe these things.
Oh yeah, that's been my experience too. And it was during the 30s, which is the Depression time. The crash of '29 leads into the Depression. Things are just horrible. People are hungry and starving. And he's like, "Oh man, we got to do something to get people to help and come together and take care of each other." And he was definitely sincere. He would work with the people. They had a job doing thinning beets at one time, and that's probably one of the worst jobs you could ever do, from what I've heard. Pulling out the extras, and pulling weeds, whatever. But he was out there with them all day long.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, are the Kingstons right now? How many members do they have?
I would guess probably in the neighborhood of 10,000.
Okay, there's quite a few
So
then.
there's a few scattered.
I've heard like 3,000, 4,000 Kingstons, but you're saying there's 10,000.
Yeah, and they have lots of kids. Like their mentality is you have to have a kid every year.
Yeah.
And in fact, somebody was telling me just recently that they had over 365 kids last year, one for every day of the year.
Damn. Okay.
So they're growing.
They're
very
pumping
fast.
out the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, the FLDS was pumping out the kids too at some point until Warren Jeff stopped it, because I think in like 2012 there was like 12,000 members, but I think like half of them, or 5,000, were under the age of 5.
Yeah. Wow.
Polygamy can grow a group so fast.
Yeah, there was a statistic somebody mentioned to me and telling the average age of the people in the Kingston group. And they says that right now the average age is 9 years old.
Damn. Yeah, that makes sense that they would have 10,000 or more by now, because if they had 3,000 even 10 years ago, or 5,000 even 10 years ago, it could easy double in 10 years with polygamy.
For sure.
The Kingstons, are they kind of business people? Because the FLDS they have construction companies, and they're really big on doing construction businesses. But they don't do a lot of, outside of blue collar business, they don't do a lot of business.
Right.
Some smaller ones, but it's all electrical, it's framing, concrete.
That's a pretty significant part of the Kingston group too. They have garbage companies, they have construction companies, they have a lot of service and maintenance, yard landscaping stuff, things like that, building, construction. And they're getting into finances. We have our own banking system in our group.
Okay.
Where and it's not necessarily that we have an actual physical bank, but they have an office where they keep everybody's money. They invest it, probably squander a lot of it.
Sure.
But they have their own record keeping, so we have like statements and stuff that keeps track of, I worked here and I earned this much money, and so I have this much money on my statement. And so forth.
Yeah. So you were born into the Kingston group. Did you grow up just being like, oh yeah, we're right?
Yeah, this is just the way it is. This is just life. I was taught that this is the only true place on the face of the earth, and the leader is the one man that has the power. The whole idea, and then you come and find out when you're reading the scriptures that it's not. It says specifically that there's not one man that has all this.
You mean the LDS scripture? Or?
Yeah, the Joseph Smith inspired translation of the Bible.
Oh, okay.
So like Joseph Smith taught one thing, and the LDS Church and we teach something totally different. Yeah,
there's definitely a big difference between the LDS Church and the modern day, and almost every group really.
Right.
But did you grow up? Did you get married in the Kingstons?
Yeah, it took me forever because my mom wasn't the favorite wife.
Okay.
The leader, so she was like number 4 to the leader of the order when I was growing up.
Okay. Do you choose your wife there?
So we have like a teaching that you have to get direction. You pray and fast and do all this stuff, and you get a dream or an inspiration. And then you talk to your parents, and then they say, okay, I think that's a good thing. This person that you're looking at is a decent person or whatever, they're acceptable.
Sure.
So then you can talk to the leader, and then if the leader says that's okay, then you can talk to their mom and dad. And then if they say it's okay, then you can talk to the girl. So you have this big, huge chain that you have to go through just
So
to talk to them.
would the person you be talking to was the current leader, Jacob, right?
Paul.
Paul, yeah, sorry. Paul. So he would be the one you were talking to. Was he older than you?
Yeah, he's the same age as my brother, who is 3. So there's 2 sisters between me and him. So he's 3 kids older than me.
So pretty much you'd go to your brother and be like, hey, I like this girl.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Right.
And you're saying you weren't the favorite, so...
So it was pretty hard. He would say, he would either say, yeah, we should pray about this a little more, we should do this. Or what most often happened is 2 weeks later, then this girl would get married to someone else.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, tears your heart out. Man,
I wanted her.
She's so cute. Or
Yeah.
whatever, And
Okay.
and sometimes she would tell me, I got to talk to the girl quite often, but it would just never work out. I think I counted it up one time, and I went through this process like more than 30 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn. So you have this girl in your sights 30 times, and you're like, do you get to know him pretty good before you talk to Jake or
Pretty
Paul?
decent. You talk to Paul before you talk to them, but you also have dances. The organization has dances at the time that I was growing up, it was like once a month we'd have a dance. And so everybody would get together and they would dance with people. And there wasn't a lot of rules for the dance at that point. You couldn't hold real close or hug each other or whatever, but you could dance with whoever you wanted.
Yeah, that's definitely a contrast to the FLDS, at least growing up in my day. I think my mom and those guys would have dances, but for us, there was no dances.
Wow. How did you guys get to know people?
No, the prophet just arranged your marriage in the FLDS, 100%. I've heard a lot of different people's stories. They have no idea. They're out just working, and they get a phone call, and they come into the prophet's office, and he's like, here's your wife. Let's marry you guys.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different stories like that. And even all dad's wives, they all have a wedding story of some sort or another, and it's all like that. Prophet calls, and bam, you're married, and you move out. And so, yeah, I guess in that sense, the Kingstons are more open. But
a little bit, but the thing that's behind the scenes is the prophet or the leader is looking and arranging everything ahead of time, because his sons have priority. His sons and the people who are like loyal to him. He's going to make sure things work out for them better, and whoever's just kind of back in the back, or whoever doesn't jump up and be super loyal, then they push back and they can wait.
I wonder if Paul will ever get a little bit crazier, because one of the things I've noticed is when you have one man that can control that many people's lives, man, they get drunk on power.
They do, yeah.
And I don't, like, a lot of them, I don't think they have that bad of a heart.
Yeah.
But a lot of times what I think is I wouldn't like to even see myself in that situation, because I'm afraid I would do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like they can't see it, and they control people. They have to have control, and they've had control, and it messes up your brain, doesn't it?
I think it does, yeah, because you can see all the stuff. Everything he does is planning and control and business-wise. Okay, we're going to want this business to do this and this, and just his brain is connected and in everybody's stuff.
Yeah, but somehow it's also the single biggest detriment to these groups. It's the reason they can't grow more. It's the reason, just like you, for example, you would, if you had a more open-minded, lenient person at the top, instead of saying no to 30 girls, he would have said yes. Of course, I don't know all the details, but if you have somebody more lenient at the top, the groups can grow. And just having one leader at the top of these seems to be their biggest detriment. That's why none of these groups have 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Would you?
Yeah, and the fact that we don't even welcome anybody to join, especially guys, especially men. There's no way. If you want to work for our business, yeah, you can work, but there's no way you're allowed, because you can't expect someone to come in and never have a wife.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't accept new members, and the FLDS was definitely that way.
Yeah.
Does not accept new members. The Kingstons they have a group of people up in Idaho, right?
Yeah, there's a farm. They have a potato farm up in Idaho.
Yeah, I helped them pour some concrete up there.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I was doing some work in Tetonia, and we had a line pump, and a guy pulls up, and he gets out, and he looks just like us. At the time, I was full FLDS, and some of my brothers and I we were pouring this garage over there, and he came over to see how the pump was working, because I guess he was going to use it, and they told him, if you want to see how it works, just come over to this address. Anyway, he was looking at us very curiously, and he watches us pour out. And then he comes over and we start talking, and I find out he's a Kingston. I'm like, oh, he's not a Kingston. I think he's a Brown.
Yeah, Brown.
And he was just part of the group. Anyway, we had a pretty good conversation, and it's weird because when you're in the FLDS and you meet hardly anybody else that's like you, and then you meet someone like that, it's pretty fun. It feels really good, and so I really took to it. And we had some good conversations. Anyway, I went over and helped him pour his house slab. Mm-hmm. And they had a bunch of guys come up and help. Yeah. And then his family was right there, and I was just like, man, it was similar to the FLDS in a sense that they could just call some guys and have everybody come over, but it was still weird to me in the sense that all the females seemed dressed just like, just like, your average people that you see. So is there dress code or?
Our dress code was pretty much just blend in. Like they wouldn't let you wear stuff that was like spaghetti straps or revealing or show your stomach type things. Yeah. And they wanted to wear longer than the knee shorts or whatever. But it's even slacked off from that recently. Because you see that the wives compete with each other. They try and dress seductively or whatever to get their husband's attention, because if you can make him want to be with you, then you get to have his presence and his company. Yeah.
So the wives all live in different houses.
Yeah.
Versus the FLDS. Almost every family I know, they might have had a really big family. Like our family was a lot of times in 4 houses or 5 houses, but totally different places, like South Dakota and Texas, and Dad would just move people back and forth. Were these houses nice houses?
They weren't the best. The ones that I grew up in were like average to slightly under average, and my particular situation was probably a little different than the favorite wife was. We had, when I was growing up, then we had a house that had an upstairs apartment, like a whole 2 houses in one almost.
Yeah.
And my older sister, who was married at the time, she lived upstairs, and my mom lived downstairs. And so I grew up with her kids, my nephews and nieces. She had all boys at the beginning, but so we grew up hanging out and playing and running together. And then when the older ones, see, I'm the youngest in the family, so when the older kids got into the high school age, and they started getting into associating with what they called the bad influence, like smoking, drinking, whatever.
People outside the group are just...
Yeah, because you're just in the middle of the city.
Yeah, that's weird, because FLDS were never just in the middle of the city, so that's definitely different.
Yeah, totally different. And so they would get influenced by, the neighbors down the street had them go out and partying and trying out cigarettes or whatever. And so my mom kind of like wanted to keep me away from that. And so she had me when I was probably 8 years old, 8 or 9. She would send me out to work on the farm with my uncle. And so then I just piled into his house. Uh-huh. And one of his wives had died. And so the kids from that marriage was in that house. And then they had 2 wives together in that particular house. So this is probably an exception to the general rule.
Yeah.
Because he had 2 families in one house, plus a few other extra kids. And so we had probably 12 or 13 kids in this house growing up.
Yeah. How many houses are just in the city versus out in the country? Do they not have a main location?
Yeah, the main location started out in the Bountiful area, but then it pretty quickly moved to offices and houses in Salt Lake. And so then that became like the business center, the Salt Lake area was. And then the Bountiful House was like the home place, is what we call. So like the 24th of July, everybody would go gather at the home place in Bountiful. Had a big yard, several acres of property. Everybody would come and just hang out, have dinner, would have a big old program, put on little skits and things like that to celebrate the 24th of July or whatever.
Yeah, you want 30 girls basically, or somewhere in there, and he says no every time, or they get married to somebody else. Does things finally work out, or?
Yeah, after a while, I was 30, almost 31, and I finally talked to someone that worked out with me, and she was someone that was younger than me. She was about 11 years younger than me.
Oh, wow. How old were you when you got married?
I was 30.
Oh, wow.
So she was just about to turn 20. She was 19.
Okay.
And so we finally get something to work out. We get married. And at this time, I'm working in the coal mine. This is like one of the big businesses that's bringing in the money for the whole group.
Coal mine, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
So did 12 years working in the coal mine, running bulldozers and front-end loaders and mining equipment underground and all that kind of stuff.
I didn't know they had that. Where's this coal mine?
Down in Huntington area.
Okay.
So you know where Price?
Yeah, I know where Price is.
Price and Huntington's like 15 miles.
Do they still run it?
Yeah, it got taken away at one point. They had a big lawsuit because of a strike, and they couldn't fill some contracts, and so they got taken away. But they've got it back now, and people are starting to move back down, trying to run it.
So there's this 19-year-old girl. What do you say? Like, man, it's been 30 times.
Yeah, and you have some direction on her, a dream or whatever. And it actually was a pretty interesting experience, because I think that the Lord did guide us. And he's like, this person, she deserves to have someone who will take care of her, who will love her. And at this point I was seeing, although I wasn't recognizing, I was seeing how the women are abandoned.
Yeah.
They're like single moms, basically.
Yeah, they're all living in these. I saw this on Escaping Polygamy.
Yeah.
I saw some of those houses. Some of those houses look pretty trashy.
Yeah, some of them are. And I could see, these women, they have to work every day. They have to support their kids.
That's weird. So they have jobs. That is so weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, FLDS women. Probably, I guess you could say they have it worse and better, but they didn't generally work jobs.
Yeah.
So these Kingston women, they work jobs.
They work and they pay their own rent.
That is crazy.
They pay rent to their husband.
Oh, wow.
To live in his house.
That is... Whoa.
Yeah.
Word. That's getting into the territory of just stupid.
Oh, yeah. And for my particular mom, she didn't ever have to pay rent, but she had to work and buy food, take care of clothing, all the stuff that kids need. And she got onto food stamps and welfare and stuff for a while, but then the government figured out that, oh yeah, this isn't legit, because she was married to this guy who's in control of these millions of dollars of stuff. So they had a big old court case, and they fined her, and she had to pay back like $100,000 and
damn
stuff like that.
Huh? That's crazy. So these women, some of them pay rent to their husbands. Oh, man, that is just screwed up. It seems like in the FLDS, men are trying. All the men I know personally, they're really trying to take care of their family. And yeah, there's going to be favorites and there's all that stuff to deal with. But for the most part, it's not that the women don't work. They work in the community. Yeah. And I'm not saying they have it great, but it's just weird that the women they have an actual job for somebody else, and then they pay rent. That is...
Yeah. A lot of it too was, so our company or our group is real big on having all these businesses. So they would buy a business, and then they would have the women work in the business to make this business work. Grocery stores or a gas station or a business office or whatever. And then they also had a business that would keep track of the records for the group, the statements and different things, and that was where my mom worked. She was in the record-keeping office for the group. But they pay her a wage, and it's typically minimum wage.
You work for a Kingston company, and then you pay her to the Kingstons. God, that's so weird. Okay, sorry, I keep distracting you from your what. I'm trying to get to the bottom of how you got married here.
Okay, yeah. I talked with my wife. I have this dream that kind of indicated that she deserves to have an opportunity, and it's probably because the Lord knew that I wasn't going to end up having multiple wives. I believed in it totally, and we were raised and we were taught that's how it was. But I always, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, am I going to take care of my wife, or am I going to abandon her for the favorite and just hang out at the favorite's house all the time, and she's going to be on her own? Because I was just like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird. So when you were growing up in there, you could see different women really struggling, right?
Yeah.
And you could see that a lot of them were having a hard time kind of making ends meet and getting everything for their kids.
Yeah.
So did you think polygamy is great?
Initially.
Were you super devoted to this?
Yeah, initially I was like super devoted, totally all in. And I'm the youngest in the family, and so I watched some of my older brothers kind of awaken at the teenage years and like, this is bull crap, I'm out of here.
Okay.
And I was like, man, I'm never going to give up. I will never leave. I was just so 100% gung-ho. And so I was watching, and as we were growing up, we would have things like we would go to the grocery stores of Smith's, and we'd go around the back in the dumpsters. And we would jump in the dumpsters and find any of the food that they had tossed out because it was starting to get old. You'd have like bananas that are halfway rotten, watermelons that are split open and half sour and half good. That was just the normal thing. We would jump in there and grab whatever we could.
Wow.
Sometimes we'd find a candy bar that was outdated and they'd throw it away. We'd stick it in our pocket. Oh, I get this, because we couldn't have sugar. We were taught the sugar's bad for you.
Does the leader live with one of his wives?
Yeah.
And just the men in general, they'd live.
Yeah, they'll typically live with their wives, and they'll have a house for each of the wives, and so he will just rotate from house to house to house. One day he'll be at this wife's house, the next day he'll go to the next one's, and so on. But it typically is he has one that's a favorite, and so anytime that he's not getting somebody pregnant, then he just hangs out at the favorite's house, and so he's there 90% of the time, and then he'll just jump over once a month. He'll hit this house, or once every 3 months go to this house or whatever. And so I remember my dad, when I was growing up, I didn't even really know that I had a dad until I was probably 10 years old.
Really?
8 or 10.
Wow.
Because
you didn't know you had a dad.
You're just like, oh, this is just the way it is. Just the moms just take care of everything. And
damn,
it's weird.
That is not how it was.
Really?
Growing up, I think every child in the FLDS was, everything's about what Father wants you to do, even in, not just in our family, but in every family. At least the probably 200 more loyal families there, all the children, everything is about what Father wants you to do. So that's very interesting that you didn't feel close to your dad in any way.
Even relationship at all. And we always were taught that the leader of the order was like next to God in this chain of command from heaven. Yeah. And so he was the next, and so we looked at him as being the person that we would all try to please, try to do whatever he asked. And we would, he would stand up in church every Sunday and speak and talk and teach us whatever. But it was not a father relationship. It was more like a leader relationship.
Yeah. In the FLDS, it was the same way. The leader's next to God, but your father is also in that line, right? It's you, and when you're younger, your mother, and then your father's basically your priesthood head. is what they call it.
Did you guys have this law of one above another?
What? No, I maybe, but I don't know what you're...
But they didn't specify it as that. So this idea that you're describing of having your parents and then the leader of the group or whatever, and then Jesus and then God in heaven, this was described to us as the law of one above another. And it was taught us as...
It's a weird name.
Yeah. That's the way heaven works. That's how we were taught. And so that's what we grew up with.
I don't know that we had a law like that, other than just basically the prophets that had your father is over you until you're 18 years old. Then you start checking in with the bishop and the prophet. So there's definitely a chain of command, but I didn't really think of it as a law of that, especially. So your wife, we got to get. The thing about it is, your wife keeps bringing up so many questions, or how you got married keeps bringing up so many questions. So we keep veering off, but back to this. So you have this dream or whatever, and you feel like you should get married, and
so I go through this process, and I talk to my mom, and she's that would be really good. This is a good person, and she's probably one that she can't really take care of herself as much as some of the other women. Some women are a lot more capable, some are not. But
what do you mean?
Being able to work a job and to do stuff.
There's skills they've learned,
skill sets or capabilities or whatever. She's still 18. At the time, I think she was 19 actually at the time, because she just turned 20 after we got married a couple months. So she's 19. She's helping her mom working at whatever the grocery store was that they were working at. And she had been on the farm. So we had a farm out in the Skull Valley area. And then we had a farm out in Nevada. And she had been working out there, and I'd worked out there. And so we kind of knew each other a little bit, but we never really, talked or done much together.
At this point, I'm guessing there wasn't very many girls that were over 20 years old that weren't married.
It's almost impossible to get past 18.
I can see that. So for you were talking about you've gone through 30. It probably started with ones that were more your age. Yeah. And then as you got older, man, that would have been tough. That would have been very interesting, and you just stuck with it. That's pretty good, man.
Yeah.
Because
determined,
in the FLDS, it's different, where you just don't even think about that. Really? And so, you don't think about getting married, and you just wait for the prophet to say. So getting 25, 30, it's not the same as if you are supposed to kind of court somebody and figure it out. So I can see how that would be even harder to kind of stay loyal and not get frustrated.
Oh man, yeah. The idea of getting married was one of the things that we were taught right probably from 4 or 5 years old. That was put up as the most important goal. Is you got to get married. You got to find the one that is your number one choice. And you had this idea of the number one choice.
Really?
And so you had to pray and ask the Lord, who's your number one choice, because you made this decision before you came down here. And you made an agreement. You got these kids that are waiting to come to that particular union. And so you promised them that you would do this, and so you have to find out who that is.
And then that probably makes so the prophet has a lot more control and say and influence. That's weird, because in the FLDS, I think at some point in the 1950s or something, there was this argument about if we made covenants of who we're going to marry and all that stuff before we came to the earth. And the consensus, I think, was that no, we didn't. There may be, there may be a few people that already, for example, in the LDS doctrine, you can be a god and then come to earth, right? Be born, and the FLDS believe that's a lot of what the prophets are. They're men that have already been to earth, and they've advanced. And this is another test for them, another advancement for them in the process. But so in that sense, maybe there's a few people, but for the most part, you didn't make covenants before you came to the earth. But so that's interesting. But I'm still interested how we got to get to the bottom of how you actually got married.
So basically once I had this dream, and I talked to my mom, and then I talked to the leader. And at this time, it was my older brother, because my dad had died in 1987, and so this is 1998. And so
What year were you born?
I was born in 67.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm an old fart.
Okay.
So yeah, I was 30, coming up on my 31st birthday.
Yeah.
And so my wife was 19. I talked to everybody in this chain, and everybody's, yeah, that would be good.
So your mother, the prophet,
My mother, the
Paul,
prophet, her parents, everybody's, yeah, go ahead and talk to her. And so and in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, this is just like any other thing. And so when I talked to her, like I could see in her eyes as soon as I started talking to her that she was like so excited. And it scared me because I'm like, oh my heck, this might actually happen.
yeah.
And I'm like afraid for a minute. Like, oh, I didn't actually ever think this might happen, because 30 times I'm getting shot down every time. It puts you in this autopilot mode where you just, okay, we'll try again, keep trying. So we talk and we're like, oh yeah, this would be so awesome. And she's like, yeah, I want to do that. And so I'm like, wow. And so I'm just like, you know what, let's pray about this for the next 2 weeks, because I'm working at the mine. She lives in the Woods Cross area.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, let's pray about this and let's find out if this is what we need to do. And in 2 weeks, I'll have another day off of work and I'll come back and we can talk it over and figure it out. And
Yeah.
so she's, yeah, this is awesome. And so I'm like halfway excited and halfway scared. And we go through this thing in 2 weeks. We come back and, yeah, let's do this. Let's get married. So then it was like, wow, this is real. Oh my heck, it's finally working out. And super excited and super happy. And we planned everything out, and so we're like, okay, so when should we get married? And we think it out, and okay, let's do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we had like a 2 week praying, feeling it out, fasting, and then a 2 week engagement to get everything ready. And we didn't want to do it, like next week, which is something that the Kingston group is like really common, is like do it as soon as possible. And I think it's halfway, because once you make a decision, you don't want them to back out, or you don't want them to get scared.
Yeah.
You don't want them to.
Yeah, because if you have 6 months,
Yeah.
I mean,
You get to know each other and like, yeah, this guy's kind of a jerk. I don't know.
he's spending too much time with his other wives.
Yeah. So they really push it to make it happen really quickly. And I think the policy right now is that the engagement can't be more than 6 months. That's like the rule. But back then they didn't have all these structured rules, because they were still kind of figuring everything out. But we just decided we just wanted to do it fast, get it done. Then 2 weeks we figured that's enough time to make a wedding dress, get someone to make a cake, plan the thing out. We already have like the place where we're doing church is like available. We can just use that, so we don't have to find a venue. We just need a little bit of decoration.
Who made this wedding dress?
My wife's mother, my mother-in-law.
Okay, sewed it up. Is it simple, or is it fancy?
It's pretty simple, but it's nice. It's a nice dress. It's really pretty. It has little beads and fringes and things like that. And
my dad got really picky about FLDS dresses, and
really,
but also he would a lot of times just marry people in their normal dress.
Really,
just bring them in from, hey, they're walking by, marry them. But
wow.
the wedding dresses later on, either they weren't really wedding dresses, almost exactly just like the normal dresses, just a little bit stylier and just simple, for sure not dragging or anything.
Yeah, she had the pretty long train that kind of drags out behind you, and the white wedding dress with the beads and all the stuff. And her mom and her helped make this. Maybe the aunt made the most of it, because her mom made the cake. And so, I think it was the aunt.
Is this massive cake, or?
Yeah, it was probably like 4 layers high, pretty big old thing. And I think the top layer was the only one that was like actual cake, and the rest was styrofoam with frosting on or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And my mother-in-law was really into doing cakes and things like that, and so she's like, oh yeah, that's cool, I'll do that for you guys. And so we did everything, and 2 weeks
Did you have to pay for?
We had to get a wedding ring and an engagement ring. We had to get the...
How much did you pay?
I got it at one of our pawn shops.
Okay. Kingston pawn shop.
Yeah. And
All
so
right.
it was, I think mine was like $100 and hers was like $70.
All right.
So
Back in that day, that was
which is probably more like 400
or 500, yeah.
now because of inflation.
Right. Cool. Yeah. When I find a girl, I'm gonna go to a Kingston pawn shop and. I'm kidding. Yeah. So, do you have a house at this point?
No, we didn't. We was working. I was renting a place in the coal mine, and at the time we was just in the process of buying a house, or maybe I had just bought this house barely a month before we got married.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got married and moved into it, we had our own house at the mine. It was a trailer house, one of those like 70-foot long, 2-bedroom trailer houses.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these fundamental groups that can't take care of their wives, it seems like they get trailer houses.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get trailer houses,
Yeah,
beaters.
that was pretty common. And down in the coal mine, it was quite a process to build a house. We were living in a canyon. There was a few houses that other people had built, but
Are you still married to your same? Okay.
Yeah,
She left with you.
Yeah.
Okay. You get this ring, you get the cake, you make the dress, and how's the wedding ceremony? Is it?
The big old party. We have a friend that puts together music, and we use the church area for our wedding venue, and we have a big old Kingston dance. For our thing.
That's what you do at weddings,
Yeah.
is a Kingston dance.
Kingston dance with a program. They'll have like a funny song where they tell jokes about the bride and groom.
Did you get roasted?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And it's fun.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's awesome.
It's all in fun.
And we probably recorded it on an old VHS tape somewhere.
Okay.
And then we have a dance afterwards, the father and daughter dance, the bride and groom dance, all these fun things. And so then we get married and have our dance and our wedding reception. We actually went on a honeymoon. We went to
did you?
Honduras on a Caribbean cruise.
Wow.
Down through the Honduras and southern Mexico out in the Caribbean Ocean. A lot of fun.
So the Kingstons go on. Do they still do honeymoons?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty common. There's probably a few that don't do a huge thing, but most of them do pretty good.
So down there on the Caribbean, do you take your shirt off and
get sunburned?
Yeah, just like everybody else, or do you sit down there on the beach with a full shirt on?
Yeah, I was down on the beach with just swim trunks on.
Okay.
I got sunburned real bad because I was out in the water doing snorkeling, and the water's kind of splashing on you all the time, so you don't realize that you're getting burned.
Yeah.
And so that next day I wake up, oh my
Shit.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, red like a lobster.
The only reason I'm asking is because it's so funny as FLDS people, and I've even seen other groups as well. They go down to the beach, they go over to Hawaii, and they're out there with a full regular cowboy shirt on, maybe plaid or something, and old blue jeans just on the beach.
Yeah.
So the Kingstons definitely don't take the dress code and that kind of stuff as seriously as some of the other groups, but they're still very controlling.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some sense that's confusing because they look normal and they even live sometimes in the city like you were saying, but they're still very controlling. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is these girls, they can't get above 20 before they're gone. So I was going to ask you, what's the ratio there? Because is there some guys that end up just they can't find somebody?
Oh yeah, there's always a lot of boys that get to 30, 35, 40 years old and they can't find someone, and they encourage them to go out and find someone that's on the outside.
Do they?
Marry them, bring them in. Some of them, they'll go to some of the FLDS functions and try and get some of you guys as girls and swipe them from you guys.
Oh shit, we're at war now.
Yeah. And so there's always this competition, and you can tell who's the favorites because the favorites get married when they're like 15 and 16, favorite boys.
Wow.
And then the
really?
less favorite boys, they get married around 17, 18, 19. And then the ones that are not so pushy, not in the favorite family, then they're 20, 25, 30, maybe.
I'll bet there's some arrogant boys over there that get married early and just are arrogant little bitches.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, for sure. And they have a numbering system too. Did you guys ever have anything like that?
For wives or?
No, for the men.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is based on the 144,000 idea.
Really?
From Revelation.
Weird.
And it's supposed to be, if you... I think in the very beginning it started out as a numbering system as people would join the group and then they would receive a number. And then it was brought out as, I don't know if it was originally like that or if it morphed into this 144,000 thing, where these are the 144,000 that are going to go through the whole world and teach the gospel in the last days. And then it changed to where a lot of people understood it as the 144,000 are the only ones that are going to go to heaven. And so if you weren't married to them or if you weren't one of them, then you're lost. And so it's weird that it changes over the generations.
How high are the numbers now?
So I think now the numbers are in the 100 to 200 range.
That's all the higher they are?
Yeah. Because you have to be like the top of the top to get a number.
Oh.
You have to have dedicated your life to the order.
So you didn't have a number?
I eventually did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
We're glad to have you here, man. I feel saved.
Yeah.
What was your number?
88.
80. Oh, sweet. That's like a tight end.
And so it was before, I didn't have two wives. I never did have two wives. And so most of them, they have this idea, if you dedicate everything and commit your life to the order, then you can get this number. And then that means you're guaranteed this ticket to heaven. You've got it made.
I can see how you got a number because you were persistent for 30 years before you even got married.
Yeah.
And at this point, you probably weren't even thinking about leaving. You were just working and doing the best you can.
Yeah.
And you were persistent enough. And that's probably another reason that Paul finally says, yeah, you can get married, because you've been persistent. And he's probably starting to be like, man, this guy's not giving up.
Yeah.
Type of a thing.
Yeah, I think so, because I was so determined. I had seen my older brothers give up and go their own way, and then one of them was sticking in there trying and working, and he was married, and finally I get married and just working in the coal mine, doing whatever they ask, going wherever, doing everything. And
are you getting paid by the hour?
Yeah, I'm getting paid by the hour. I remember when I first went down the coal mine, just after I graduated from high school, I was getting $3.36 an hour, which was minimum wage at the time. But it was before I got married. It was when I was renting
That's crazy. What year was that?
1986.
Minimum wage was
$3.36 an hour.
That's wild. You've been around.
Because,
you've seen a lot of things.
Oh yeah, seen a lot of things change with the financial, with the interest, the inflation. And it's weird because as I'm going through this, I'm super determined, super dedicated. But I see people I'm working with. Like I was a crew boss in the coal mine, and I had a bunch of people that was working for me. Some of them were Mexican, some of them were white guys, some of them were whatever. But they're making probably $5 or $6 an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm making $3 an hour. And I'm like, I'm the boss, and I'm making $3, and they're making more than I am. What the heck, And we were always taught that, yeah, we are working for the Lord, which is why we get less money. We're not taking from the Lord so much. We're always going to have a house. We're always going to have food. We're always going to have a place to work. We'll always be taken care of.
Yeah, that is bullshit.
Yeah.
Because that's how it was in the FLDS a lot of times. You would have an FLDS crew boss or just guys working there, and then we would have Mexicans. Nothing against them, but there's 30 Mexicans and they're getting $30 an hour.
Yeah.
And the FLDS boys are getting $15, $16
right.
an hour, and they've been there for a couple of years and their wages aren't getting raised in any way. Mm-hmm. And these Mexicans some of them are making up to $35 an hour. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, for me, I was never somebody to sit there and be like, that's fine. I was always like, screw this. But a lot of FLDS men and boys, they work for, it's gotten better over the last 5 years where they're getting what they actually deserve.
Right.
But before, yeah, that's just how it was. It was like, we're an FLDS company, and this is where the prophet wants you, and it doesn't matter how good you are, just hammer down, man.
Yeah, that was exactly how we were too. It was just like, you do what you're told, you go work wherever they tell you to do, and you do your best, and you make the company go ahead. That's just life. But it's this thing that is in the back of my mind, one of those things you put on the shelf. Put it on the shelf if you don't understand it. And so I was thinking, and I'm like, we're working for the Lord, we're building the kingdom of God and all this stuff. And it turns out when I get to the point where I'm ready to leave, it didn't end up that I had all this stuff that they had been promising, that just like totally pissed me off so bad.
Yeah, I can see how you stayed for 30 years because my oldest brother is like 36, and he's totally loyal. Yeah. And he won't even really have a conversation about things being messed up. And so and I know other people that are that old too. And isn't it hard after being there that long to consider that you might be wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, that was so hard for me. And I was probably mid-40s before I actually really decided this is it. This is not cool. And it was coming down to, I've been working in this business, and then I moved to this other business, and I'm working, getting really low wages, but I'm surviving, I'm getting by, and I get to this other business where I worked in the early 2000s. So we had this farm in Nevada, and we was leasing it for a while. When the lease gets over, then we moved back to Salt Lake, and I was working with one of my my half brothers, doing some manufacturing, machine work and stuff like that.
What were you growing out there in Nevada?
Mostly alfalfa. We had cows and we had alfalfa.
Did you have pivots out there?
Yeah, we had a couple of pivots, a bunch of wheel lines, like 14 wheel lines, a lot of flood irrigated areas, and then a whole bunch of BLM rangeland.
Was it pretty dry, and you were just mostly irrigating? Yeah,
it's in northern Nevada, so if you go through Wendover and then drive about an hour west and then go north from there.
Okay,
that whole corner of the state was this one big ranch.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Nevada, but...
So we were out there and we did all this stuff and learned a lot, and we come back, and I was working for my half-brother at this machining business, and I'm like making $10 an hour, barely scraping through, trying to buy a house, and just...
What year were you making 10?
2003.
What was the average wage for somebody like you at that time? Was it 15, 20?
I think that for that job doing machining, it'd probably be in the 20 to 25, maybe $30 an hour range.
Okay.
And we were making...
Did you know at the time that you could be making a lot more somewhere else?
I didn't really. I figured that I could make a little more because I had always been making less than the average. But I just thought, you know what, this is what they told me to do. This is where I'm asked to work, and so I'm going to work here. But I started to see, and you know what, this doesn't work financially. The numbers just don't add up, and I'm going to be stuck here.
Was there any time throughout, say from when you're 20 to 35, that you go down to Las Vegas and do something crazy there?
No.
or anywhere. You
totally
go
dedicated.
Totally dedicated. Okay.
I think the most rebellious I did was when I wanted to get out of the coal mine, and so I saw that there was a need for some help at this farm in the Nevada ranch, and my sister, her family was taking care of it, running it. They're like, man, we need help so bad, see if you can come and help us for the summer or whatever.
Who was she married to?
She was married to my uncle.
Okay.
So she's the one that I
to her uncle
with as a kid. Yeah, to her uncle too.
Damn, something about that I hate. I hate when people marry their uncle.
Yeah, it's so common in the Kingston. Oh man, it's like your uncle or your half brother.
Yeah.
Sibling.
Something about that just pisses me off.
Oh, I know.
Even in the FLDS, they kept it a little bit farther than that usually.
Right.
I'm sure there was some cases, but man, when people marry the uncle, it just pisses me off.
Yeah, the power imbalance. The dad is, or the man is always older, 5 or 10 or 20 years. And then he's, being the uncle, he's like the authority figure. There's no way that they're equal. And so it's just not, this ain't right.
How does it even get to the point where you marry your uncle? It's so weird to me.
Yeah, it's because there's not that many people. And so, you can't, it's because, polygamy is illegal. So you can't just go out in the world and tell people, oh, hey.
Well, it's socially unacceptable.
Yeah, it's socially unacceptable. People, was persecuted for it. And back in the 50s, they did raids on, they probably did raids on you guys too, I think.
Yeah.
But they did this raid on our group. And
okay.
Put a bunch of people in jail, gave them subpoenas, made them come and testify in court. When they wouldn't testify, then they made them sit in jail for contempt of court and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's hard to find a hot believer to be your third or fourth or 16th wife.
Yeah. Especially when they haven't been raised with that.
That's the answer to why do you marry your uncle.
Right. And so that's all that's left.
That's a good, we should make a TV show called Why I Marry My Uncle. Yeah.
Yep. That's pretty much it.
You're over doing these farms and doing all these different businesses. Do you end up buying a house or?
Yeah, so after we got off of the Nevada farm, came into town, back to Salt Lake, and I started working for my brother and trying to buy a house. And we got this house that we're gonna buy, and the order has this policy that you can't own your house. They have to own it, and then you kind of rent it from them.
Really?
And you can pay it off, and then you don't have to pay rent. So you kind of technically are buying it, but you're not officially the owner on paper.
Do they buy the house and give you a mortgage?
Yeah. So they buy the house, they put the debt on your statement, and then you just work until you can pay this debt off.
Is this to help people get into houses, or is this just kind of how it should? Do they say this is how it should work?
They say that this is how God's kingdom works.
That's stupid.
Yeah. And they have all this money because they're taking the money from every single business. And so they're like, okay.
And their wives are paying them rent.
And everybody's paying rent, or everybody's paying on a mortgage.
How stupid of a person do you... I mean, I think that if you're a man and you're making your wives pay rent, you are just one big idiot.
Yeah.
I don't have any words to describe how much of a pussy somebody like that is. Just stupid.
It is crazy, yeah. It's like, how could you not even have compassion to make them sit there and pay rent?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my heck.
I mean, I wouldn't even want to really consider somebody like that my friend. Like, I know people with a lot of wives, but generally I think that they were, I'm sure they weren't always.
Yeah.
And things just get messed up in these situations anyway. Right. But to make your wives pay rent, especially if you do have money, is just... I understand if they were working together and the husband didn't have enough money, and so the wife was working for a while, or the wives or whatever, they were working and they were trying to get on top of this, but over an extended period of time where it's more like you're paying rent and we're not working together to make everything work out.
Right.
You're just a damn idiot.
You're just a slave, yeah, and you're allowing it, yeah. That's where I came to start understanding when I was trying to buy my house, and so the way I ended up doing it is my wife, I had her stay home to take care of the kids because I don't like to have my wife working and paying for babysitters. Yeah, that's like, she might as well just take care of the kids and just raise the kids and love them and take care of them and teach them the things we believe in. And so that's what we did in our particular family. And I only had one wife, so it was probably a little different, So I would work, she would take care of the kids and raise them and do all this. And so that's how we did it. But man, we struggled. We were trying to get this house paid off. And the way our mortgage thing worked is we didn't have a minimum monthly payment as long as we was paying the interest portion, so that we weren't going farther behind every month. So was it interest to the Kingstons, or did they actually have a mortgage? It was interest to them. So they have what they call a mortgage company, and this mortgage company has this money from the group, because everybody in the whole group turns in their money and gives their money to the leaders, and then we just use whatever we need to survive. We don't really have our own bank accounts.
Oh, so you don't just pay tithing?
Right. No, we have tithing on top of this. Every year, at the end of the year, whatever amount we increase, whatever we go ahead, then we would take 10% of that and we would give it. It would like take it off of our statement and pay it to whoever.
Okay, I'm confused. You pay, so I get a paycheck. I give it all, is that right? I give it all to...
Actually, you don't even get a paycheck.
What do you...
So we have these statements, right? The statement is just a record of, if you go to the store, we have all these businesses that we own. We own all these grocery stores. We own everything, basically. And so anything that we buy, we try to buy it from a business that is owned by the order. And so we have our statement that is a record kept in our computer in the accounting office. And when we work, then we get paid onto that statement. We do get a check stub, but they will staple it to the printout every month.
Where's the money?
So the money is always in the group. It stays in the group all the time.
But legally you have to give somebody a paycheck, right?
I guess not. They would make it so that on paper it looks like a paycheck, because you would have a check stub, and they would actually print out these checks, and then they would just deposit them directly into their own thing and just transfer the money from this business to your statement account.
Man, I better get better at accounting.
Yeah.
They probably have some damn good accountants over there.
Yeah.
I still don't see how that's legal.
It's probably not, because you're not 18. You can't agree to anything like this. We started working when I was like 8 years old, getting a little bit here and there, getting room and board, maybe $10 or $100 a month eventually. And
so where does your actual money come from that you were going?
So if we wanted to get cash money, then we would have to go to the office and we would say, okay, I need to buy a car, or I need to buy something here, and it needs to be outside of the group, that a business they don't own. And so I would actually go there and they would give me cash and write out a slip and say, okay, you got this much cash, and then they would subtract it off of my statement.
Okay. So let's say your statement said you have $20,000 on it.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go and say, hey, I want my $20,000?
No, not without a big reason and justification, and okay, this is something that's important, and I couldn't just walk in and say, I need $20,000.
So it was almost like a bank where they say you do have $20,000 or
right.
however much you've earned from all your paychecks, and you can come in any time and get the money you need to buy some gas or whatever it is you're trying to buy a couch. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you wanted to buy a dirt bike that was $10,000. Could you walk in there and say, look, I'm...
You would have to arrange it ahead of time. You would have to say and justify it and say, okay, I want this dirt bike for this reason. Because if it's just, I want to go play, they'd be like, no, that's not good. You can't do that. And they wouldn't let you. But if you could justify it, one time I bought a car. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to just buy a new car because it's only $14,000. And instead of paying 3 or 4 times for a $3,000 car and having to break down in a couple of years, I'm just going to buy this new car. And so I talked to the people at the office and told them, I need to get a car. And this is a really good deal. And it's a good car. It's going to last me for 20 years, whatever. I justified it. So I went in and I got a check. And the check was from a business of the order. That's the name on the check. It wasn't my personal name on it. Mm-hmm. And so they wrote out the amount on it, and I took it in, and I went to this car dealership, and I said, okay, here's what I can spend. So if you can make this car work for this amount of money, then we'll do it. And so the salesman calculated everything up and ended up being like a penny over. And so he just took a penny out of his pocket and threw it in.
You finally got something from you got something out of the Kingstons. It was a penny. So what car? That's crazy. What year was that? A car was $14,000.
So that was in 1995.
$14,000. That's crazy.
Subaru.
Damn.
Yeah, for
14
$14,000.
Sweet.
Brand spanking new. It had like 7 miles on it.
Wow.
Yeah, right from the.
Yeah, you have seen a lot of things, man.
Yeah, you couldn't find that anymore though.
What do you know? Was it like a Outback or?
It was a Subaru Impreza,
Okay.
little 4-door
Mm-hmm.
stick shift.
Wow.
And
Cool. Do you still have it?
No, I drove it for 20 years.
Those Subarus they go.
Yeah, they go a long time. They run good.
Yeah, I also feel like they're a good car to get after you just leave a Colt.
Yeah, yeah, they got gas mileage. They're a lot inexpensive.
Yeah, my mom has a Subaru, and that thing's. I'm so glad we did. After all my experience, I'm just so glad we didn't get like a Ford Explorer or
Right.
different. That thing's gone better than any of the other cars.
Yeah, they've been good.
Yeah, it's a great car. So, what brings you to the point where you're thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna leave the Kingston group"? Was it a 5-year deal? Was it a 10-year deal?
So there was a few things from about the time I graduated from high school, just a little bit of thing here that kind of like stuck in my mind, like something not quite right. And then a few years later, there's like another thing that pops up. And one of the things was my half-brother, the one that I ends up working at this machining place for. So back about 10 years before that, then he gets arrested for beating up his daughter when she runs away from the marriage to her uncle.
Oh, he's in the group.
Yeah.
And how many? He has some wives or whatever,
Yeah,
and
he's the second in command. Like his brother is the prophet or the leader.
Yeah, your brother. Oh, his full brother.
His full brother.
Okay.
Is the prophet, and so he's like the second in command for the whole group. And he marries his daughter to his other brother, full brother. And she didn't want the. Yeah.
He marries his daughter to his. Is that. What is that relation?
So
uncle.
The daughter marries the uncle. Another uncle.
Damn. I hate those uncle marriages.
And she
because
did too.
There's the cousin ones, but they're a little bit farther.
Yeah, and cousin ones are more of an equal thing because you're both closer to the same age. But an uncle and his niece is just.
I
right.
hate that.
Yeah.
Uncle. When you marry your uncle, you're a bastard.
Yeah. And this made the news and everything, And so she tries to run away from this arranged marriage, and she didn't like it. I don't know if she had any kids at the time or not. I don't think so.
So his daughter.
Yeah.
Does he marry it to
his brother?
His brother. Which one?
Which is I think it's the next one younger than him.
Okay, so it wasn't the prophet, though.
So it was the one younger than the prophet.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much younger are you than Paul?
Than Paul. I'm probably like 5 or 7 years, maybe 9 years younger.
Okay.
And then the one that this guy married his daughter to is a year older than me.
And how old was he versus her?
He was probably in his 40s, and she was probably a teenager, like 16, 17, something like that.
So she decides she wants to run away.
Yeah, so she runs away, and he finds her, and he throws her in the truck, takes her up to this Washakie farm way up north, out of the reach of anybody, and beats the crap out of her. He took his belt off and whipped her and beat her until she was unconscious.
And you knew about this?
I didn't know until after. But
How long after?
So I heard about this. It was probably 6 months to a year after, because they had a big court case. So she wakes up from being beaten unconscious, and she's all alone. And so she decides, you know what, I gotta get out of here before they come back. So she walks barefoot down to the highway and hikes, several miles, 5-10 miles. Finds a gas station and calls the cops to come and get her. And so they come and get her, and she tells the story. They take her into protective custody or whatever it is, and she ends up having this big old lawsuit and court case, and he ends up going to jail, the dad.
What year was this?
Probably 1980s.
Wow, this is a long time ago.
Maybe 90s. Yeah, probably more like the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. mid-90s, maybe 94, 95, somewhere in there.
Did Paul condemn this behavior?
No. So they tried to claim that she was getting in drugs and running off and having sex with a boyfriend, and that her boyfriend beat her up. And then the court case says that he beat her up and they throw him in jail. And so it's like, I don't think that someone else beat her up. I think it probably was my brother that beat her up, you know.
That's crazy. Paul's been around forever. What year did he become the leader?
He became the leader in 1987 when my dad died. And there was probably like a 2-week transition period where they were saying everybody needs to pray and fast and see who should be the next leader. But it was basically decided ahead of time anyways.
Yeah. So this guy is probably drunk on power now.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, at this point.
It's been, over 30 years, almost 40 years.
40 years, yeah. A couple of years away. 30
Yeah.
years.
That's wild. Yeah, he's been there for probably too long, and I think there's probably a lot of people that are getting fed up with some of the things he's been doing, because when you're in that position and you're kicking that many people out and you're controlling that many people's lives, you're over 40 years, you get a group of people that is pissed off at you.
Yeah.
And it's just no recipe for success. And the farther you go and the more things you get away with, the more you feel like you're in the right and God's guiding you, and you just get totally drunk on power in a way that you cannot even see yourself. And I bet at this point he's probably just, Yeah,
at this point, so I've been out for about 15 years, but at this point it seems like there's still a lot of people that are totally dedicated and totally believing in him and want to fit in and do what's right and get a number and all this stuff. And he probably doesn't
get a number. Oh my God, okay. Yeah. But what are you saying?
And so it's probably a little bit of a different situation than what you probably see with Warren Jeffs and FLDS, because he doesn't tell people as much control for their personal life. Like, he doesn't say you need to have a kid this time or that time or whatever. He just gets up in church and says, our goal here is we have to have a child every year, and we need to try and have more girls than boys. We need to do this business.
How do you do that?
So apparently there's some kind of a timing thing. When the woman starts to ovulate, then if you do the deed at a certain time, then it's more likely to have a girl.
These motherfuckers, they're really trying to get the girls.
Yeah. It's just like,
damn.
Oh, man.
That's wild. That's wild. Now that, I never heard that in the FLDS. No, I never heard that. I would be surprised if that was ever a thing in the FLDS. Yeah, we're going to have sex at this certain time so that we have more girls, and, later, 20 years down the road, then everything's going to get a lot better,
Right.
These guys, I don't know. This sounds pretty freaking messed up to me.
It really is. And I think a lot of the boys that can't get married, they end up just drifting away, and he can kind of like, okay, that's fine, you just go do your own thing. So most of the people that hate him or that get problems with him end up just, kind of leaving, so that it doesn't accumulate in the group.
Yeah, I think that he's probably pretty good at making sure it's a slow process, and that he doesn't piss somebody off so bad that they leave with a whole bunch of frustration. This is something Warren Jeffs really did as leader, is he would kick somebody out overnight and they would leave totally pissed off.
Wow.
And so I think if he hadn't done that, he would probably still be around today and not pissing so many people off.
Yeah.
But his view of it was, this person's bad and the Lord's displeased with them. And I think the Kingstons have, I think they are devoted to their religion, but it seems to me that with what you've described, they're a lot more power. They control your money in an insane way.
It's a lot more of a business than a religion, for sure. Not
just in the mindset of it. in the financials of it, because like you were saying, they're essentially your bank. They have this balance sheet, and you can't just withdraw that money anytime you want.
Yeah.
That's, in some sense, that's genius.
It
But
really is.
in another sense, I just, personally, nothing would piss me off more.
Yeah. And when you're raised and you don't know any different, then you just think, well, that's just the way life is. And so you're like, okay.
That's wild. That is genius. If you're not, because you could expand that to a pretty big group, right? There's some things that you can't control. You can control people, but as soon as the group gets so big, there starts being too many people. But with that kind of a system, I can see how it would be totally normal, and you grow up that way, and you can expand it to 100,000 people where they have a balance on their sheet, and if you don't want to let them withdraw it,
there's nothing they can do, because they can't go to a regular bank. They don't have a bank account there. They only can have a bank with you.
Yeah, it's genius, man.
Diabolical.
It's diabolical and it's smart, but it makes me wonder if some of the leaders there think more in terms of controlling people than they do just in terms of we're trying to be good religious people. It almost seems like they've come up with the mindset of controlling people, and they're just essentially using religion as a reason to do it. But I guess because there's, in different groups, you see some people, like we were talking about before, they're really sincere and they're religious and they're devoted. But it almost seems like this Kingston group has got to the point where somebody there is thinking more just in terms of controlling people, and they're not sincere.
That's how it is now. And it started out with the original organizer for it as being, this cooperative, everyone working together to help each other. But as soon as he died and it moved into the next leader, which was my dad, then it became, okay, you have to pay the bills, you have to make ends meet, you have to, it becomes a business basically. And then when his sons take charge, then this business turns into control of everything in every single way. Like, they control your house, they control your cars, your finances, every decision you make, where you work, is all what they decide. And they literally teach this law of one above another, that you have to do this to get to heaven, because this is how heaven works too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Weird. To me, it seems weird.
Yeah.
But I also totally understand and I get it. So what point do you decide, okay.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things you were saying is when you were a teenager and this happened with this girl, you started asking questions. And I think that's really important because in my opinion, people that don't ask any questions before they turn 25, they really can't leave. So to me, it's important that somebody at least gets a serious question in their mind before they're 25, where they're to the point where they might even consider that the group is wrong. So you were saying you had that moment at what age?
There was always this thing, these little tiny things that I had been seeing my whole life. And it's interesting because my mom always taught us to pray and ask the Lord to guide us, where the policy of the group was more, we got to fast and pray and we got to do this, but it has to agree with the leadership. It has to fit in with them. And so I kind of had both of these teachings that was clashing at the same time. And then the uncle that I grew up with, because my dad was the leader, so he couldn't really take care of us or whatever, so I worked for my uncle on his farm. He also taught that if you ask someone to do something, you should never ask them to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. So you should be more of an equal. You shouldn't be, this hierarchy thing isn't emphasized so much.
Well, that's a great teaching.
And so that I think that was the thing that allowed me to ask questions. Because nowadays, when they teach things, they say, are you questioning the prophet? You can't, the leader is the one that's talking right to the Lord, and you can't question him, and this is the way that God wants it. But what I was growing up with was, yeah, you need to ask the Lord, you need to question, you need to do this. And so I had both of these things colliding. And so I'm like, wait a minute, but I want to be loyal, I have to do what's right, but something's not right. And as I would go along, it gets into the early 2000s, 2003, 4, up to 2009, and I'm just like, man, financially I can't make it. Like, it's literally, I'm never going to pay my house off, I'm never going to do this. By the time I start getting a little bit ahead, my car's going to wear out, and I'm going to have to buy a new car, and it just puts me right back to where I started from. I was talking to him, and I brought this up to my boss and to the leader. We had a meeting, so we're talking, and they give me a $3 raise. So now I'm making $13 an hour.
Wow. How old are you?
So I was probably 42, 43, 44.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Just so I understand this, the way you're judging your financial success is you go to the office and see what your balance is.
Yeah, they would give us a statement every month. They'd give us a printout to show us, here's where you're at, and here's what you earned, here's what you spent. And every month I'm looking at it, and I'm like barely paying the interest, and I'm maybe getting $100 ahead. Sometimes I don't go ahead, sometimes I'm scraping by, but
wow.
The best I can do is maybe $100 ahead towards the principal on the house.
Yeah.
And so I'm adding up $100 a month times this many months, and I'm like, this is going to be 30 years before I ever pay this house off. And as soon as my car's going to wear out in 10 years or whatever, then I've got another $20,000 that's tacked on top of it. And I'm just like, this doesn't work.
You feel like a slave.
Yeah, I've started realizing.
That's wild, because you're the prophet's son, at least the former prophet. Yeah. You're the prophet's brother, at least half brother.
Yeah.
And yet here you are just really struggling along. Let me ask you this. Do you think that there was some sort of... did Paul look at you in kind of a negative way where he felt like you should be controlled? Or even if it was subconsciously, where he wanted to always feel in control and he didn't want you to get ahead financially or otherwise, because subconsciously even, or consciously, there was this threat of, you're his brother and you're younger, and maybe you're good more looking. I don't know, but you probably have some good intelligence. How do you feel this?
Yeah, so I think that he didn't really feel threatened like I would grow up and take over from him, because he's got like 25 wives and I have one, and so there's no competition as far as wives. But he probably was like, okay, this guy is willing to work and he's willing to do what he's told, so I have to keep my thumb on him. I have to keep him from getting too big, because if he gets too financially successful and he starts looking around, then he's going to see what's going on. He'll see that we're controlling, that we aren't living the same as he is. And at this same time, I started to get these little hints that I was not being treated the same financially as my half-brother's son, who was in the same business working with me. And I was the manager, and he was like a co-manager. He would try and come in and help make parts sometimes, but he was not hardly ever there. He wouldn't ever dependable. You couldn't depend on him, But I started hearing, and I actually saw one of his statements one time where he was like getting $12,000 this month from a different business, or maybe it was a business we were working from actually. He got a $12,000 payment or bonus or whatever it was, because the business made some money. And I was like, what the heck? What's going on here?
Yeah, it seems to me like it either has to be you got to let somebody level up to where they're going to be happy and they're going to be in with you and financially and wives and all that, they're going to feel a part of this.
Right.
Or you got to keep them down below
Right.
where they can't really even see it. Because if they're somewhere in the middle, they're going to be upset.
Right.
And I think at a basic human level, this is just common sense. Meaning we do it, we click together in groups like that without even purposefully meaning for it to be that way. So it's just, I can totally see how they wanted to either keep you totally down, or they were going to have to let you come up and be successful and be one of them.
Join the inner circle, yeah. So I don't think they wanted me in the inner circle. And I think that part of the thing was they was like, okay, we wanted to keep him from giving up, but we also don't want him to get out of debt or get ahead. So they gave me a little bit of a raise. And then around that same time was also when I got my number. And so I think that number was like, okay, we better reward him with this number or he's going to give up.
Sure.
And so that was when they gave me that. And it was probably just a couple of years before the 2008 market crash and the housing crash and all the economy downturn. And so that had a real big effect on our company because at the same time that the housing markets and everything crashed, then they had a strike at the mine. Our company was building parts for this mine, this coal mine, and so they were, doing a huge project. We had done like $1 million worth of work for them, and then they have this strike, and they can't fill their contracts, and they go bankrupt, and they went out of business, and so then they couldn't pay our company. And so then our company, everything just slows way down, and I'm like, what in the heck? What's going on here? And I could see that either we were going to go out of business or we were going to do some different work because this company was gone. That was our main thing.
I guess that's the bad part about having companies all working together.
Yeah, when the one that's the big money maker goes, everything else is wiped out with it.
Yeah.
And it did, that's what it did to our company. And so I'm like, and this time is when I'm like struggling financially so much, and I'm starting to see all these little things. This guy, my brother beat his daughter and he had to go to jail. Something's not right there. His son is getting paid $12,000 a month from my company, and I'm getting paid $2 or $3. What the heck,
Yeah.
He doesn't do hardly any work. I'm managing that, I'm running equipment, I'm doing all this stuff. And he's getting 12 and I'm getting 2 or 3, and I'm like, something, so there's all these little things that are starting to like poke at the back of my mind and try and make me open my eyes. And I'm just praying, I'm asking the Lord, I just want out of this situation. Help me out.
Yeah, so this is a long struggle you've had over 15 years. The first 10, you just couldn't get a wife.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get paid very good. It was probably a massive encouragement to get married. You felt like you were coming up. You felt like things were starting to improve. Then you go on another 10 to 15 year time where you just are struggling financially.
Yeah, just struggling, trying to make ends meet. And then I see these things happening, and so I'm like, you know what? Something's wrong, and I think I want out of this. And at least I don't want to work for this brother anymore. If I can get away from him and maybe get into a business that can pay me what I can survive on, maybe I'll still stay. And so, like 2009, November of 2009, things are slowing way down, and my brother calls me up and says, hey, come up in the office and let's talk about stuff. So it's like Friday night. So I go up there, and turns out that come Monday, we don't have any more work for you. And I'm like, what? And it wasn't so surprising because I could see everything would slow down.
Yeah.
But I was like, wait a minute here. We're supposed to always have a job. We're supposed to always have food. We're supposed to always have a house. Like, how am I gonna pay the bills? How am I gonna pay for this house? How am I gonna feed my kids? And he's just like, it was kind of like, yeah, we just don't have anything for you to do. See ya. And it was in one hand, I've been praying all this time, asking the Lord to get me out of this situation. But on the other side, to have it actually smack me across the face, okay, you're out. And I'm like, whoa. This is what woke me up, is opened my eyes. Okay, you've got to figure out what's going on here. And so I went home that night. I filed for unemployment. You know, like I gotta do something. So filed for unemployment, and it takes a week waiting period and all this stuff. You got to do all the stuff to qualify. And I started getting unemployment. 2 weeks later, I start getting $400 a week. And I'm like, okay, this is enough to. And I think I got onto food stamps too. You know, I got the state help with food stamps.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I can survive. I can pay the bills and I can eat, take care of my family. So what do I do now? Do I want to go work for some other business, or do I want to try and find a job outside on my own? And I was like, man, I don't want to work for these guys anymore. I want to be free. I started to see in my mind that I had been born as a slave my whole life, and it pissed me off.
Yeah.
I was so pissed off at my dad, because ultimately it's not my brothers that brought me to this earth. It was my dad, and he was the one that was in charge. He was the prophet. He was the leader. He set up the whole system that I was born into. He made this whole mess, and I was pissed at him. Like, I was like, I will never forgive this guy. Care what it takes. If I go to hell, I'll bring him with me. I will never forgive him.
So you feel really pissed off at your dad, but at the same time you probably feel pissed at your brothers, because I know this feeling where your brothers they're living the high life, and they feel like they're better than you mentally, spiritually, physically, and they look at you in this negative way, like you're one of the peasants, and in heaven you're not going to be up there with them. And to me, in that situation, you have two choices. It's to say, fuck you, I can do whatever I want, and I'm actually just as good and I'm better than you guys. Or you can keep living under that and let that mentality just destroy you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. That's exactly where I was, and I was so pissed. In fact, a couple of months later, then my brother calls me, the owner of this company that I just got laid off from, and he calls me up on the phone, and I just looked at the financials, and what are you doing getting unemployment? Like, you're making our unemployment insurance go up. You need to turn this off, you know?
Yeah.
That pissed me off. Like, I was fired up, man. I was so mad. And I was like, you don't even know what the heck you're talking about. You told me that you was going to have to lay me off, and it's not a termination. I qualify for employment. I've been paying it out of my taxes, whatever, this whole time. And like, I was fired up, and he said, we don't do that in the order. We don't do that to this people. You're going to have to turn that off, or we're going to get the judge, and we're going to tell him that you're doing it wrong. And I was
really?
Like, I didn't swear at him or nothing, because that's what we were raised. But I was like, we can go talk to a judge right now, and I'll tell him my side, and you can tell him your side, and we'll see who he sides with. Because I knew what the laws were. I'm not dumb. I read the rules.
Yeah, because when somebody files for unemployment, their company has to start paying a little bit more until they get off of it or find another job. Yeah, I know how that works.
So when he finally looked at the records and saw his company was paying them more, and I think it tells who's unemployed, who's filing.
Yeah.
So they know this person got laid off, and
I don't know if it does anymore. I think it probably did at that time. I think that it doesn't now.
Yeah, maybe. But he was mad, and he's like, you got to turn that off. And I'm like, no way, I'm not going to do this. We'll go talk to a judge right now. I don't care. We were on the phone for an hour. He was trying to tell me all this stuff, and I was just basically, screw you, man. I was pissed off.
Yeah, because you're trying to take care of your wife and kids.
Yeah.
And he fired you from your job, essentially. And now he's mad at you for unemployment because that's taking some of the business's money.
Taking a little bit of business money, yeah. So that was one of the big things that, like, you know what, I am not going to go to church anymore. I'm not going to associate. I'm not going to be under their thumb. I want to be free.
Yeah, and because in your mind, you were this sincere religious person that was trying to do all these things right and trying to build up the kingdom of God. And after 10 years of not getting a wife and then 15 years of struggling financially, thinking that sometimes somebody was going to give you a break and let you get ahead. After all that, you start realizing, oh, maybe these guys aren't in it for the religion.
Yeah.
Maybe this is more about control, and you're sincere and they're not.
Yeah.
And I guess in some sense, in your mind, you were probably thinking maybe our roles should be reversed, where I'm more charitable and I'm more open and I'm more loving, so I should be in maybe a more position of power, and they're more after power and control.
Yeah, it showed me basically that the whole thing was a scam. All they care about is having money and power and sex and wives and control of everybody.
And yet, even in their minds, they're probably justifying everything through a religious lens, saying, and to them, they don't want to think, oh, I'm this power-hungry person.
Right.
So they'll just look at you as more unworthy.
Right.
They'll find your faults. They'll find everything you did wrong, and they'll keep you down that way in their minds, because they don't want to say to themselves, oh, I'm looking at him bad.
Yep.
Or they would have to see themselves in a bad light.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how it was. So that's when we stepped away from the church, and it took us, 2009 to 2013 before we started officially moving to something else. And we started talking to missionaries for the LDS church. We started to look around.
Those aren't hard to get hold of. I've had them. I've been here for 2 months, and I've already had them at my door. So.
Yeah. They don't come to our house anymore, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, next time they come, I'm thinking about bringing them in and being like, look, I got my setup. We're doing a podcast.
Let's talk about this stuff. What do you think about this and this?
Yeah. So real quick, I just wanted to ask, those Browns that were building their house, we were negotiating over the price and of me to bring all my tools and come and help him pour his slab. And I was thinking, since you were telling me all this, so was he going and seeing what his balance was with the group bank, essentially, and saying, okay, I have this much, I'm going to charge $2,400 to go and help him pour this slab and bring all my tools and everything? And then he went to the church, and is that how that was working?
Probably somewhat. For businesses, you have a little bit of a budget type system where you say, okay, we need to have a budget, and we're going to spend this much money for this and this much for this and this much for this, so that we can do our operating expense. And then each month you go along and you see how it matched with your pre-planned budget.
But this was his house for his family, so
it could have been more of a personal thing. But he would have to say, okay, if I want to do this to my house, I have to verify, okay, can I get the money from the office in order to pay for this? And they would arrange it ahead of time.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I think he gave me a check, but I can't even remember if he had just written it or if he'd handed it to me.
Yeah. Probably he would pay for a check. Most of them do stuff like that because we don't use cash that much.
Yeah.
It's frowned on because you can get a check and then they can say, okay, the check isn't going to go through until this day, so we don't have to have the money in the account until this day, and it gives them a little bit of leeway to float money around.
Yeah, that's some good accountants.
Yeah, they're super good at moving money around from this bank to that bank to this account to that account to try and cover things. Yeah,
I was thinking if I'm looking for an accountant in the future, I should just go up and see if there's any ex-Kingstons. Yeah. Hey, I need an accountant.
Hey, I need some of this help.
Okay, so just stop going to the meetings, or?
Yeah, I slowed down. I was like, you know what, I'm going to skip church for 2 or 3 weeks, and then maybe I would go once, and then I'd be like, I don't want to go anymore. New Year's meeting was a special meeting. That's when they would give out numbers. That's when they would tell, okay, for the new year, we got these goals and this, and so I kept going to those. And the number of people would get to talk in the New Year's meetings, and so that was the thing. Okay, you can get up. I don't think I went to New Year's meeting that year because I was just mad and I didn't even want to, I don't want nothing to do with you guys anymore. But
you get your number just not that long before you leave.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny.
And in their minds, as you start to leave, it becomes more and more of a justification for all the way they've treated you this whole time, because they're thinking, sure enough, he's leaving now. And we were right, the prophet was right. Sure enough.
Yep, verified everything they thought and everything. Yep, he's just getting discouraged and giving up. Yeah. And also about this time, my wife had a stroke.
Oh, really?
And so it was, they say it's like what typically you would get if you get in a car accident, like they're in the throat, the carotid arteries in your neck. One of the little pieces of skin tears loose. And they say typically if you get in a car accident and you get hit from behind and it pulls your head or something, it can cause this. But she hadn't had anything, like no injuries, nothing like that to cause it. So they was like, this is so weird for someone her age, this young. She's like 34, I think, when she had that. Just like healthy. Out of the blue, she has this stroke. And so it was pretty bad. She was like, she couldn't talk, she couldn't remember, didn't know who she was, didn't know who we were hardly. Her whole right side was affected. And so on top of all the other stuff, this happens. Like devastating type of injury, brain injury. And so we're in the hospital, and some of the people come and help my sister that I had always grown up with, that took care of me like a mom. She jumps in and helps our kids and takes care of them. Our neighbors around us are LDS, and they come in and they bring food and they feed our kids and feed our family and stock up our pantry and our cupboard and our fridge.
Yeah, they're so nice.
They're so nice. And yet the leader, my own brother, he never comes to see me. He didn't go to the hospital one time. And one of his wives, that's my full sister, she came to see us, and she comes and visits with us. And so it's okay, that's on his behalf, but it's like he didn't take time out of his day to come. And so that's one and more of the things, like, they don't even care about us. They won't even come and say hi or come to the hospital when we have this kind of a thing. And so it's just, I don't really want to have anything to do with them anymore.
Yeah. So shit was really hitting the fan for you, because you're broke, you've been struggling, you thought they were going to let you get ahead more with everything. And after years and years, you're financially broke, your wife's having a stroke, and
everything.
And this is one of the things that I tell people, is to leave a religion like this. What you need is an increasing amount of pain, just building up, and it has to get high enough that you're like, okay, I'm done.
I've had enough, okay.
And this is another reason why, even you're a good example, where if they would have treated you a little bit better, even though you did see things that weren't right, you probably would have stayed. If they would have paid you better, if they would have... Did you ever try getting another wife?
We considered it, and I was always of the mindset, you know what? I don't want to be the one that ignores the first wife or ignores the second wife if the first wife is more favorite. I don't want to be that person. And so I'm like, I was programmed to say, okay, polygamy's right, but if God doesn't tell me, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to see if I can slide under the radar here.
So you didn't want another wife,
so I
really?
didn't really pursue another wife.
Okay.
And he never told me. I'd always prayed. I was totally, and I actually did have a good relationship with God. He had taught me things, and he had helped me understand things. And I had a lot of experiences in my life where I should have been killed, like crazy riding motorcycle stuff and getting crashes. And in the coal mine, I got buried in a big coal chute, a big pile of coal. You have a huge pile of coal, and you have hoppers underneath that pull the coal out onto a belt, and then the thing will funnel down to it and feed it. And I fell in one of those. I got buried up.
Wow.
I don't even know how high over my head, and I didn't get killed. I've never heard of anybody in that situation surviving.
That is a bad situation.
Yeah. So Heavenly Father protected me. He saved my life multiple times in the coal mine. And so I always had this relationship where I would talk and I would pray and I would ask him, and he would give me ideas. He would tell me things. And so I would just do what he asked or do what he inspired me. And everything just worked. And so at this time when I'm struggling through all this stuff, I'm so pissed off at my dad that I question, does God even exist? Is this real? Why would he put me in this position? Because we were supposedly born into the one true church.
Right.
We already know everything. We already have everything lined up, but why is this happening to me? And it made me question, does God exist, or is this one true church not true? Because they, in my mind, they can't both be true.
Yeah, but so you were saying God was inspiring you and guiding you and helping you, but wasn't it the same thing that was essentially giving you a lot of witness about your own religion in a lot of sense?
I think that
the same thing, right?
I think that was what was pointing out all these little flaws that I was seeing. Because from what I now understand about God, is he's not a tyrant. He's like the consummate gentleman. He will say, okay, here's what's real, but I'm not going to force you. If you want to believe it, then I'll help you. But if you want to do whatever you want to do, you can do what you want to do. You have agency. And I have had a lot of experiences that have helped me to come to understand this in the last 5 years. And so I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure out now, why was I born into this one true church? And yet these things are happening that are saying, wait a minute, it might not be true. Is God real, or am I actually not in the one true church?
Yeah, but do you think that it was more your logic that was your logic coming to actually work and question different things? Because your ability to question things is not really there when you're that into a religion.
For sure.
And so was your ability to question things, because sometimes what I wonder is God in some sense literally just your ability to question things?
There's probably some of that, I think, too, because there was my brain I was always really scientific, really analytical. And so I'd always look at all the details and try and calculate everything out and figure it out. And so I was always trying to think of things and reason things through. But there would be things that would come occasionally, like an idea would just pop into my mind, just like someone is standing next to me and tells me, what about this? And it was something I hadn't even considered,
Yeah, there definitely seems to me to be an intelligence that gives us ideas that we never even thought of. And if you think about something for long enough, it seems like that intelligence can give you more light on the subject. Mm-hmm. And I think this is supported by a lot of different people's experiences, and even people like Nikola Tesla had sayings like this where he said there's an infinite intelligence somewhere that's given ideas, and we have to figure out how to receive those in some sense.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot more of what God is like. He knows all this stuff, but he's not going to force us. And so if we ask him a question, how do I solve this problem? And we seriously connect and do everything, and we figure it out, or we try to do everything we can, then he'll be like, okay, you're really close, but what if you think about this? And then he'll just kind of bump us a little bit.
Think of God as a person, or do you think of it as the universe? Do you think of God as an actual real thing, person we're trying to please, or are you in the boat where you just wonder a little bit, you're not sure?
I think that that's a super interesting question. I think that God is actually like an organization of people or intelligences.
What?
Like maybe a unit. I don't even know.
When you say an organization, are you meaning of intelligence, or are you meaning people?
So I think that initially there's intelligences that are all separated, and each one does its own thing, but they can unite together, and they can learn, and they can grow, and they can become what this God entity concept is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what God is this gathering of intelligences that have come together, and they have learned everything, and they actually know how everything works, and they have the ability to do stuff. And I think that...
But where is that concentrated?
So I think that this is pretty cool too.
Is it in people?
Not necessarily. I think that there's higher dimensions to our existence.
Sure.
Because the science and stuff, the way the numbers come out in the math,
yeah,
it shows that we have 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time here that we can interact with, space-time. But the math shows that there has to be higher dimensions, maybe up to 10 or 11 dimensions altogether. And you've got dark matter and dark energy that incorporates, I think, 90% of everything that exists in the universe. And then the stuff that we can see in our space-time is like 10% or 15% or whatever. So that's a small part. And so I think that these higher dimensions is where God resides, but he does stuff to create.
So do you
world.
When you say God, do you mean a person?
These people that have reached that state.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think God is like a state of being.
Okay.
That you come to, or you learn about and learn how to become. And you might have to be given certain capabilities or be taught all the information, the understanding to bring you to that point. Because you can't really just when you're in a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional world, you can't reason what 10 dimensions are going to be like. But they can tell you, and they can say, okay, do this or do this, and it will bring you that understanding. Or they can say, okay, this little detail will help you understand better.
Yeah, we definitely don't understand anything past, this world and physics. Right. I love physics because I love the idea of cause and effect, and I think physics is a good example of somebody, in some sense, if a person loves physics and is really into them, that almost seems to me to be more of a pure interest in God in some sense than all this spiritual stuff that everybody in these religions is going through, because it is the science of the world, and it's fascinating. Yeah,
totally. To me too. I've always been this super interested in science and physics, and that's what I got a associate degree in mechanical engineering, because it's so interesting to me.
When you were younger? Or?
When I was working at the coal mine.
Yeah. And those guys didn't treat you right. So I forgot that I was going to ask you what you thought about Escaping Polygamy, the show in general. I mean, the Kingston group is in like half of them or more. And the main people that are, what do you call them? The stars of the show or whatever are from they're those girls from the Kingstons. Amanda Ray. Who's the other ones?
Let's see. What is I think there's Michelle and Amanda, and there's their names kind of escape me right now.
That's all right. Are they Kingstons?
Yeah. So the one of them is the daughter of my half brother that I was working with, and then the other one is the daughter of my other half brother from a different family that I grew up with as a teenager out on the farm. And then I think several of them are actually from the daughter of the one that I worked with that beat up his daughter for trying to run away. Okay. And they're from like 3 different wives. So there's quite a few of them from that same family.
They didn't want to marry their uncle.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think of the show? Have you watched?
I've watched several episodes. And it's probably a little bit hyped to make it interesting for TV, but then also there's a lot of it that's like really stuff that happened. Like they have to, get out without being caught because their parents will beat them up or abuse them or whatever, and they won't let them go on their own. They'll like call the cops and tell people these kids are underage, they can't run away. The cops will either throw them into juvie or force them to come back home. And so but at the same time, they don't want to become the fourth wife of this uncle that they don't even love,
One of the things I liked about that show is when I was in the process of leaving the FLDS, I watched pretty much every episode.
Right.
And it was fascinating to see the difference between the ones that were about the FLDS versus the ones that were about the Kingstons.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ones about the FLDS, I know everything. I know if something's true. Yeah. I know the situation. I know everything, whether it's true or not, or what's being hyped for television.
Yeah.
Versus I go watch the Kingston ones, and I think, I have no idea what's really true or what.
Right.
And that made me look at television in kind of a different way than I otherwise would, because when I go watch something, I really don't know for sure if something's accurate or something isn't accurate, and there's always things that are.
Yeah. And they have to kind of make it interesting for TV or people won't watch it, and so they kind of hype it up or reenact or make it more scary looking. Or
yeah, for sure they do. Another thing about it is when you're watching something that you've been there and you know everything, it's really interesting whether they're describing it accurately or not. For me, those shows were really interesting because I knew everything about the whole situation. And other shows I just don't know that much, so I'm not as interested.
Funny thing is, a lot of it for me is I was watching some of it to say, okay, now what actually happened for real? Because we hear from the grapevine, this is what happened. But if we can see for ourselves from the point of view of these girls that are leaving and hear their story, I get some little details that I had no idea, because I was a generation older than these kids were.
Yeah.
And so I was removed, and I had left before this ever came out. They kind of try not to tell you their business anymore. And so being on the outside and looking in and saying, what's going on now? I know what went on in my time, but what's going on now? And so I'm kind of watching the next generation younger than me and seeing what their experiences is through this TV show. And so there's a few things that I can see, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not quite.
That's not accurate.
But oh my heck, is that really? Did that actually happen?
Yeah.
So there's that perspective for me.
And I'll bet for you, the ones about the Kingstons were some of the most interesting television you've ever watched, because that's where you once were. And even though things aren't accurate and that it's hyped up in some places, there's other things that other people might totally overlook, that because you were once there, you're like, what?
Have you seen that other, I don't know if it was Hulu or Lifetime or whatever, it's called Secrets of Polygamy?
I haven't watched it.
The follow-up next, it's not like the Escaping Polygamy series, but it's like the follow-up show.
Oh, I haven't watched it.
Looks at that same series. That one's actually even better, I think. So
I haven't watched it. I've watched a lot of FLDS and cult documentaries. And I've been more interested in cult documentaries lately that don't have anything to do with Mormonism. Just because I got tired of watching, and I've been in that world for so long, and I've been down those rabbit holes so much, and I just got tired of it. But the other day I watched Wild Wild Country, and I thought it was really good because they seem to be, in the documentary, they seem to be more after the truth. Have you watched it?
I haven't seen that one.
They seem to be more after the truth and what really happened. It seems like there's no biases in the producers. they're just genuinely trying to figure out what happened, and they're asking all the different people that were there. And I really like how they went about it, and I wish the documentaries about the different fundamental groups would be done in more of that style, because I think they would be more interesting.
Wow. Have you ever looked into the Joseph Smith history? The new information that's coming out now?
I don't know very much of the new stuff. For one, I grew up reading Joseph Smith. He was my hero growing up. I don't know if that's the way it was for you, but I looked at because we didn't have books or movies or anything. So to me, Joseph Smith's history was literally the most interesting thing that I had to read.
Wow.
And so I loved Joseph Smith when I was growing up. And I'm really acquainted with the history that he wrote about himself, like the history of the church. I've read through those several times. And just any of that books that were written about him that are presented in a good light that we had, I'm really acquainted with those, but I'm not acquainted with, I know the common arguments against Joseph Smith, but why? What do you got?
Because the church history wasn't written by Joseph Smith. It was actually written by Brigham Young in the 12.
When you say the church history...
So the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, that book, that's one of the church history books that was put out. And that was compiled and organized and rewritten, and the whole history that the LDS Church has now as their official history, that wasn't actually written by Joseph. They recorded a lot of stuff, and they have original documents and things. But then Brigham Young came and he compiled and he edited and he changed and he rewrote the whole history to make it support his idea of what happened. And now the church has put out the Joseph Smith Papers project, and it's all of the original records that they accumulated from New York all the way through Ohio and through Zion in Jackson County, Missouri, and then in Nauvoo. So all of these records that they have, they published them, they took pictures of them, and then they transcribed them.
You mean the LDS Church did?
Yeah. And then they published them on the internet on this Joseph Smith Papers website.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can go back and you can read them all. And you can see what was actually there, and you can compare it with what's in the official history. And you can see where Brigham Young changed things.
I'm not too acquainted with this. This realm.
This is a whole new world. In fact, there's probably dozens, if not 100 or so people that are digging into this now. In 2017, the church made a deal with Larry H. Miller.
Who's that?
Larry H. Miller, the Utah Jazz owner.
Oh, okay.
He died just a little while ago. But back in 2017, they made a deal because they wanted to publish this Joseph Smith Papers project. And so they made a deal with him that he would do the financing and he would arrange and he would have the people that do the transcribing, and they would take the pictures and they would put everything and publish it on a website, and they would do all this stuff. And so the church was like, we want to have your help doing this, and Larry H. Miller was,
financial help.
He could do that. And it's crazy because the church has all this money. They want to build temples. They don't want to do this history stuff.
Those cool buildings. They are cool.
Yeah. So they actually made a deal with Larry H. Miller that he would do this, but some of the agreements was okay, you guys give me the whole package all at once. You have to just give me everything, and I'm going to have my people do this.
Was he a Mormon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he'll do this and he'll publish it, but they can't really interfere with it, and they can't just they can't just give him a little bit here and a little bit there and drag it out for 20 years or whatever. He's like, I want everything, and I'm just going to publish it, take pictures, transcribe it, and put it on the internet.
So you're saying that it was done by LDS people, but it wasn't the actual church doing it?
Yeah, it wasn't the actual church controlling it. I think now that it's finished or mostly finished, then they oversee it and manage it. And then the church does. But Larry Miller and his team is the ones that took everything and put it online. And you can go and you can read everything now. And man, it paints a whole different picture of Joseph Smith. Like,
why, is he more of a gangster or?
no, like I don't think he even lived polygamy.
Really?
Right.
Are you sure?
Like
I don't. I would be skeptical of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard conspiracies about that before, but I don't
Yeah.
especially have any reason to believe them.
So when you look at all these original records and you dig into the things of the Joseph Smith papers and the things he had scribes, and you've probably heard that he was carefully worded denials, telling people that he wasn't living it, but in secret he was actually doing it and teaching it.
Yeah.
All this stuff, that's kind of the common story.
Right.
But when you look at all the records, you find out that there's not a single thing from his time period where he or any woman ever claimed or said anything to support polygamy.
Well, there's like there's a lot of things, because you have all these women that were married to Joseph, that you have all their kind of stories and different, right?
Actually, you don't. You have a lot of stories from decades later in Utah when they're looking back 20 and 30 and 40 years and saying, yeah, this happened back then, but you don't have anything from that actual time period. We have journals from Eliza R. Snow that she wrote on the day that she supposedly got married, and she wrote in her journal what happened that day, and it was just like an ordinary day, nothing special happened.
Yeah, but take somebody like Eliza R. Snow. She was one of those staunch supporters of Mormonism, and she claimed she was married to Joseph Smith. That's the history, I think. And so you're trying to say that she wasn't married to Joseph Smith?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't seem to make sense to me, because she wrote about it later, and you're saying she was just in some kind of a conspiracy to...
Yeah.
I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that.
And the funny thing, they say this story about her getting pregnant and being pushed down the stairs by Emma Smith.
Sure.
The funny thing is she never even lived in that house with them. Like,
where does that story come from?
That comes from Utah years later when they're trying to justify Joseph being the originator of polygamy.
So your view is that Joseph Smith didn't live polygamy?
Yeah.
That's your view, or is that just your suspicion?
That's what I have come to understand from studying all this stuff, yeah.
I don't think I could believe that.
Yeah.
Well, you have Fanny Alger, right?
We have a book that was written about 40 years later where she claims to be this person that they're talking about.
And she was just part of this conspiracy.
She probably wrote a book and said, hey, and there might be an argument that was going on at that time. Like she might have been coming on to Joseph or something. And
I definitely think there was an affair.
Because there was a description of some kind of a scrape. They call it the actual words, and this is one of the things that Brigham changed, or somebody changed in the history.
But how do you know he changed it?
Because we have the actual original records. You can find them on this Joseph Smith papers, and you can read them for yourself, and you can see the changed parts, and you can see the new version.
Are you talking about the history of the church?
No, it's the original documents of the papers. So what they did is they wrote down all these things that was happening, and then they would come back and they would gather up these individual pieces of paper and they would organize them into a book of history. And so they would take this paper and they would copy it, and then they would say, okay, is this what we want it to say, or is this what, or do we need to add stuff in to make it?
You're saying Brigham Young and the modern the historians in the 1860s, 70s.
1860s, 70s, 80s, 90s, yeah. Actually, Brigham Young says this. He writes in his own diary, I spent the day with John Taylor and Willard Richards revising the history of the church.
Yeah, but
50 times, 50 different days.
Yeah, but that makes sense because he would be really interested in the church history.
Yeah.
I guess in your mind you're saying that he was actually trying to get it all rewritten in his way.
Yeah.
But to me, the way I would look at Brigham Young's entry like that would be to think, oh, he's genuinely interested in the history of the church, and he's trying to make sense of it, and he probably doesn't want to put something out that people wouldn't understand.
That's probably what I started out thinking, but then you see the actual documents yourself, and Joseph Smith writes, so one of these particular documents, we have the original document, and it says Joseph Smith was walking up and down the street this evening, talking to his scribe, and telling the scribe that we're going to prosecute and excommunicate anyone that's teaching or preaching or practicing polygamy, because Joseph forbids this.
But
everyone can only have one wife. And then we have a copy of that same document with the lines spaced out to make it fit room to change and add stuff to it. And in different handwriting, we can see that someone crossed out this line and says, Joseph Smith forbids it unless he gives permission. And this law is that only one man on earth has the power to give plural wives.
You don't believe Section 132?
No.
Why?
Because it wasn't published by Joseph.
Wow.
It wasn't in the Doctrine and Covenants until 1876.
This, to me, I'm going to be honest with you, this sounds to me like you're a little off the wall and off the charts. It sounds to me like...
Exactly.
It sounds to me like, I don't know,
It's really
inaccurate.
crazy, huh?
But if you view Joseph Smith as somebody that didn't live polygamy, well, do you support him?
Yeah.
You do?
Because I see there's like 25 different speeches and talks and conference and church things that he talked where he's tearing polygamy to shreds. Like he's literally calling it an abomination. He's calling it whoredom and all these things. And nothing that he ever said out of his own mouth ever supported polygamy.
I don't know if I can believe that,
crazy.
but that's wild. So you support Joseph Smith?
Right.
Wow. Okay.
And only because I've come to see, you know what? I don't think he actually did all this stuff. I don't think he actually lived polygamy. I don't think he actually was doing this. Like he literally, there's records of him saying, so a couple of weeks, maybe a month before he gets killed in Carthage, he's sitting down to breakfast and he's talking to one of the Nauvoo High Council guys. I think it's William Marks or somebody. And he's saying how they've got to find out and figure out who is spreading this polygamy rumors, who is doing this secretly. Well, we're going to excommunicate them.
Joseph definitely ordered the destruction of the press, right?
I think he finally rubber stamped it, and he says, yes, go ahead and do this. But it was because John Taylor and some of the people were saying, you know what, they printed all this stuff, they're doing this, they're doing that. And they were actually counterfeiting money as well.
Were they?
Yeah.
Do you have evidence of that?
Yeah, there's actual things, written records in the Joseph Smith papers that show that they were counterfeiting money. They were making coins, counterfeit coins.
I'm not arguing that the press. I'm just saying I figured that it was destroyed. I guess we're talking about why it was destroyed.
Yeah, part of it, I think, was because they printed out this Nauvoo Expositor article that accused Joseph. So there was a big article, a full-page article that was saying all this stuff was going on in the church.
Yeah, polygamy, right?
Like one sentence that's about polygamy in this full-page article.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, you can pull it up online. And it was saying William Law and the Higbee brothers and Jane Law, his wife, they were accusing Joseph of doing polygamy, and they were saying, he said you could have up to 10 wives, and you could have this, there's 3 or 4 details in there that kind of match up with Section 132 later on. And one of them was you could have up to 10 wives, but Section 132 says you could have if the Lord gives you 10 wives or more, it doesn't put a limit on.
Right.
So it's slightly different. And then there's the first wife has to agree to the other wives. And there's 2 or 3 of those details like that are similar to Section 132. And there was some kind of a revelation, it appears, on April 12th? Yeah, April 12th of 1843, where Joseph was asking about levirate marriage. Do you know in the Bible where Jesus says they are not married or given in marriage?
Yeah.
So Joseph was asking about this question.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal? Why does it say they're not married or given in marriage in heaven? And he gets a revelation that told about how marriage works, how it can be eternal, but it was nothing about polygamy. And it was saying how when your brother dies and you marry the wife,
right,
then those people aren't married in heaven. But that was how they did it in the old days, to do inheritance, because that's how they would pass down their property, whatever.
This is a pretty wild conspiracy, man.
Yeah, it is.
I think I've heard some little things about this on the internet, but I've never had somebody tell me about it. I think I got a Facebook message a little while ago, maybe 6 months ago, really telling me, Joseph didn't live polygamy, and I busted out laughing.
Yeah.
So wasn't Joseph at some point tried by the High Council for what happened with Fanny? Yeah.
There was Oliver Cowdery, actually. I think Oliver Cowdery either saw an argument between Joseph and Fanny, or saw them arguing or fighting or something, and he thought that it was some kind of an affair or something going on. And so he was telling people, hey, Joseph had an affair with this girl. What's going on? And I think he left the church over it. But I think that he might have been excommunicated, because when he started asking questions about it, then they're like, okay, you can't accuse the prophet of doing this or whatever. And so I don't remember who was all in this excommunication trial, but I'm pretty sure Brigham Young and Heber Kimball and probably Willard Richards, whoever was there. And Joseph,
but they supported Joseph.
Yeah, they were supporting Joseph at the time. And it's hard to tell for sure from the records if Joseph was present in there or if he was not there, because Oliver's like, okay, we need to wait for a day or two to so Joseph can get back into Nauvoo so I can explain this to him and we can work this thing out, this girl business, because it's not exactly the way that it's being blown up to be.
When Joseph was martyred, I think that we can pretty fairly make the argument that the mob and the group of people that were doing it were angry because of this polygamy stuff, right?
There was some problems with that, but I think that Brigham Young was actually behind a lot of that.
You really think so?
I do.
What the hell, man?
There's records of people seeing Brigham Young in the mob with his face painted black.
Oh, come on.
The night before and that same day. And they recognize him and they're like, what the heck? How come you're here? I thought you was back east. And Brigham Young tells him flat out, he's like, I'm not here. And if you ever speak about this, it will not go good for you.
I wish I could believe this, but I just don't for some reason.
You have to look into the details. You have to look into the information because it is so crazy. It's so crazy.
If Brigham Young really pulled that off, he's a genius, man.
Yeah.
I don't believe he did, but...
Yeah. So there's been a huge amount of research in the past 4 or 5 years, reading all these documents. There's probably several hundred people that are just reading through these and doing things and presenting them on podcasts and things like that. And so if you're interested, there's a lot of information that you can actually look at.
Yeah, one of the things that I think, no matter how crazy somebody sounds, I'm always willing to look into some.
Right.
I think Brigham Young, one of the things I think is the best thing for Mormonism that ever happened was the martyrdom of Joseph Smith. Because if you don't have a martyr like that, you're not going to have near the people rallying around a cause. Because he made this cause so much his life, and then he gets martyred. And so I think truly that was one of the best things that ever happened for Mormonism. And one of the ways I look at Joseph Smith and Brigham Young is just as fascinating guys. It's not, right now, I don't view them as, oh, I support this person or I hate this person. They lived at a fascinating time in history, and they did some crazy things. And I just view them as interesting people. And while everybody else is crying and mocking him and all mad at him, I just am sitting back like, what happened? Because another thing that I think a lot of times is history is always written by the winners, and there's a group of people out there that think Joseph Smith had no good in him at all, and he was this horrible person. And maybe he was in some sense, but also maybe he had some really good characteristics, and you can't argue that he didn't found a church that's huge now. And
and the funny thing is, the people that came to Utah with Brigham, they weren't even the majority of the church either.
They came in several groups, right? They came in...
Well, yeah, there was several groups that came, but the total amount that came was about a third of what was back in Nauvoo.
But in Nauvoo, there's a ton of people that are getting mobbed and they're getting pushed out, right?
Nauvoo wasn't quite that bad. There was some mobbing, there was some pressure, but I think that the thing that caused Brigham Young to actually flee and leave was because the feds were coming after him for counterfeiting, and so he had to get out.
You really think?
Yeah, 'cause he took...
this seems like a crazy conspiracy, man.
Yeah, it does. So there was about 20,000 people in the church in Nauvoo at that time, and when he left, he took about 2,000 people with him, so about 10% of what was there. And they left and they went to this winter quarters area that was clear at the far western border of the U.S.
Yeah.
And everyone else stayed there, and the mobs just let them stay there. They didn't run them out of town. They didn't kill them or nothing.
And then slowly they all came out to Utah, right? You don't think so?
Less than half.
I know maybe all of them didn't come.
About a third of them, actually.
How many people were in Nauvoo? 12,000?
Around 20,000.
20,000.
In 1846.
20,000. Didn't at least 10,000 come out to Utah?
From what I've heard, there was 2,000 with that initial company that came with Brigham, and over the next 3 or 4 years, a total of around 5,000 came.
Really? I think...
Maybe 5 to 7. Depends on... There's different countings, different records that count them up.
10 years after Brigham Young came into Utah, wasn't there at least 20,000, like 20,000 people over here? They were still proselyting and had missionaries going out and gathering. And the people that were coming from overseas in England and all these other European countries and coming to America, when they left Nauvoo and came west, those people a lot of them were still on the way. And over the next 5 or so years, they kept coming because there was missionaries out there. And then most of the people who stayed in Nauvoo didn't do a lot of missionary work. But the missionaries that were out there and the missionaries that Brigham sent out kept bringing people. Where are you getting your evidence, man?
Just reading it out of the Joseph Smith papers and reading it from history, things that people are researching. So there's hundreds of people that are digging into all these records and stuff. And it is so eye-opening. So
you're saying that what everybody's gone on, because there's some pretty good historians that have looked into Joseph Smith and they've gone through all his wives. There's some pretty good historians that argue about Joseph's different wives. They argue whether he had 32 or 38 or 40. Yeah. You're saying these guys are just on weed?
Most of them are just looking at the stuff that Brigham Young put out years later in Utah. The affidavits all come from that time period. The stories of these women that were married to him they originate from that time period. If
Joseph did live polygamy, it did have to be a secret at that time, because it was very unpopular, right?
That's the story, but there's a lot of people that were actually living polygamy. There was a group in New York called the Cochranites, and their whole religion was this spiritual wifery thing where they could marry somebody in a little nighttime ceremony that would last for one day.
Hey, I think modern culture calls that hookup or something.
Yeah. And it's funny because this is where Brigham Young and Heber Kimball were on their mission. And they were on a mission, I think, in the 1834, 35, 36 time period. And when Brigham Young comes back from that mission, he brings Augusta Cobb with him. And she has a baby, and she names him Brigham. And she left her husband and her 9 kids to come to Nauvoo with Brigham. And we have letters that she wrote where she's asking Brigham to show her this revelation that Joseph Smith had about her marrying Joseph. And she was supposed to come, according to this revelation, she was supposed to come and be one of Joseph's plural wives. And so she's like, Brigham, I want to see this revelation. I've come with you. I've let my family go. I've moved here. This baby that she brought with her dies on the way. He's 6 months old and he dies because of bad weather or something. And so when they get to Nauvoo, she doesn't have the baby anymore. And so she's in there and she's writing to Brigham these letters because he wouldn't let her talk to Joseph personally. Like in the letter it says that you made me promise that I would never talk to Joseph alone, but I want to see this revelation. I want you to show me. And he's saying, okay, I will. I'll show you, but he never gets around to it. Then there's another letter where she says, I want to meet this person. I want to see this. And Brigham tells her that Joseph is going to come to her house and he's going to marry her. And it's going to be on this particular day. And so they're waiting, and he never shows up. Joseph never shows up. And so Brigham does the wedding himself by proxy to Joseph while Joseph was still alive, and Joseph never shows up.
So you feel like Brigham Young is this mad gangster
That's what it seems
overthrew Mormonism, but I view Brigham Young as a really loyal person to Joseph Smith and a person who felt very strongly about his religion.
Yeah.
I get your point, but it would take me over a year to research that. And so I think for me, my initial reaction to this is probably not.
Yeah.
This probably isn't the case, but especially because I haven't seen historians. And I hear conspiracies, or there might be, I don't mind hearing them.
Yeah.
But another thing is when you have a lot of historians that get together and they really study something, and they're purely after the facts, then that's somebody that I would be interested in talking to, and that's somebody that I would want to believe more than just the idea of it. And I get, you've said you've read different things, and maybe you've read a lot more than I think you have. How much have you read?
Since the 2022, it's been my full-time occupation. Like, I haven't had a job, or I haven't been working. I've been researching and studying and reading all this stuff and looking at what other people are finding. And so it's almost all day, every day.
How do you make money?
I have a little bit of.
You buy Bitcoin?
I have a little bit of rental income.
Okay.
From renting stuff, but I've been doing this for 3 years now, looking at stuff, and you find out that these historians are mostly church historians.
Yeah, a lot of them are church historians.
Trying to maintain the narrative that the church is putting on.
But why would the church be interested in maintaining a polygamy narrative?
That's a good question.
If it would very benefit the church if Joseph Smith didn't live polygamy.
Actually,
the church.
Think about this. How does Brigham Young connect to Joseph, the Utah church?
What do you mean?
So, if Brigham Young is legitimate, then he had to be connected to Joseph Smith, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was, right?
He was the president of the 12 apostles, but that's not the leadership of the church in Joseph's day. The church had...
Well, he was the prophet.
So the church had the first presidency. There was the prophet and the two counselors, and they did all this stuff, the managing the affairs of the church. And then they had the 70. The 70 was the people that helped the 12 apostles do the missionary work. And in the D&C it tells you that the 12 apostles don't have any authority in the church. They don't have any kind of authority in any established stake.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
No, they don't. Yeah, they don't have authority over the
established stakes or wards or...
Is that what it is? That's the 70 apostles.
The 70s are more like... So the 12 are the main group that are the missionaries, and they are supposed to go out and use the 70s to help them spread the gospel to all the world.
What I remember is that a high priest... There was a conflict between a high priest and an apostle. Was that what it is? And they were arguing about if the apostle had authority over the high priest. My understanding is that one of the 12 has authority over. Essentially, they have authority over everybody, but that doesn't mean they get to go in and just tell a high priest or a bishop to do something that they shouldn't do, especially. And that should come through the prophet, but that doesn't mean the high priest is above them in authority in any way.
That's how Brigham changed it to be. But originally the high priest was the governing body of the church, and the president and his two counselors was the presidency of the high priesthood. But then this completely separate quorum was the 12 apostles, and their only job was to do the missionary work.
Yeah, their job is to do the missionary work.
Right.
But you're saying this wouldn't benefit the church if Joseph didn't live polygamy?
It would totally destroy the connection between Joseph and Brigham.
Then why don't you look at the restored church as a good thing?
The restored churches had some problems of their own in the recent history. Like
What is it called, the restored church?
Restored LDS, RLDS.
The one that Emma's son...
Yeah, the one that...
Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, I don't think Jehovah's Witnesses have anything to do with Mormonism.
Oh, no, they don't.
There was the RLDS, and they were the ones that Sidney Rigdon... So Sidney Rigdon was the first presidency counselor.
Yeah.
So Joseph and Sidney, and there was a third person, I don't remember exactly what his name was after Oliver was excommunicated. But there was those three. They were the first presidency, and then when Joseph gets killed, Joseph and Hiram both get killed, Sidney Rigdon was the only person left in this first presidency group that was alive, and so he took over that portion of people that didn't follow Brigham to Utah. And then when Joseph III gets to be old enough, because he was like 12 years old, and so when he grows up and gets to be old enough, then Sidney hands it over to him.
Okay.
And he becomes the leader.
I'm not too acquainted with that history, so I'm not going to push back.
Right.
And I'm not pushing back because I don't mind hearing crazy things. I'm just saying I'm skeptical about this whole situation.
Sure.
Like, it seems to me that the historians have got a lot right, and it seems if all that was true, then something more would have come through by now.
That's actually what is coming through with the Joseph Smith papers. We have all these new records. They're not new, they're the original records. But we see all these original records that were written, and people that are in the church that are saying, wait a minute, something is different. Brigham Young is changing things. They're seeing Brigham Young saying that Joseph is doing this now, and nobody ever said in the church that Joseph was living polygamy before he was killed. There was people that were enemies of the church. John Bennett, the Laws and the Fosters, the Higbees that did this Nauvoo expositor thing. They were trying to start their own church, and they're trying to take over and take Joseph's followers. And they were accusing him of living polygamy. And there was probably, I'm pretty sure Brigham Young was living behind the scenes, because he actually has a couple of kids before Joseph gets killed by some plural wives. And yet Joseph never had any other kids.
I will say that's wild. Like, with all the history of Joseph Smith and polygamy, him not having another kid, I think they dug up the graves and tested the DNA. And they have tested all kinds of DNA and have never found Joseph had another kid. I will say that's pretty wild. I've been surprised about that.
Right. That is really crazy to think that he has 34 wives or whatever the number is, and yet no kids.
Yeah, that's wild.
There's so many things. You could dig into this stuff for years. And a lot of people have dug into it. There's actually several podcast channels that are bringing out these original documents, one section at a time, and one detail, and like digging into this particular thing.
Who was holding these documents?
I think the LDS Church was, because Brigham Young brought a lot of stuff with him when he came from Nauvoo.
So why would they let him out?
They probably didn't realize what they had.
Really? Do you really not think?
I
don't think they're that stupid.
Tens of thousands of pages of stuff like.
Right, but I don't think they're that stupid.
They're
not.
Really weird.
They're actually not that stupid. If they let them out,
there's a reason.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. It's really weird, because a lot of these original documents, it really raises questions about the legitimacy of the LDS Church. And you're like, man, what the heck, Why would they publish this if it's saying that they're not true?
Brigham Young was a fascinating guy, and I kind of like some of the things he did. And he's just a gangster.
Yeah.
I loved reading his sermons growing up, because there was no other sermons as fierce, or there was nothing I could read that was as direct as Brigham Young standing up and just ripping people.
Did you read the one where he says he would stick a javelin through his own wife if she was caught with someone else?
I think so.
And how he justified.
Yeah.
And how he says you don't ever get too much in love with any of your wives, because you might have to dispose of them at any time.
Oh, wow. He was a gangster.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating guy, though, and I guess there's some things that are pretty admirable about that. But it's an interesting history, and the only thing that piques my interest about your whole theory is that Joseph Smith didn't have any other children from anybody besides Emma. Like, DNA wise, I think they've dug about as deep as they can.
Yeah, I mean, someone else could come and say, well, I've got in my history, they say that I come from this person, and say they could do DNA, but they've done a lot of DNA testing already, and none of them yet.
Yeah. I do believe there's people in history that were really good, that everybody looks at as really bad. And they think that person did a lot of bad things because that's the main running theory, and that's all we know.
Yeah.
But if you could go back and see what truly happened, then you would see everything in a different light. And for someone like me, a lot of people say your life has been hard. But I think of people just 100 years ago that had no chance and they got killed. Millions and billions of people have had terrible lives and then just been killed. And here I am sitting here doing this podcast. And sure, life may have been hard, but I'm alive. And I have the opportunity to sit here and talk and look at history and think about things. And I don't think I should take that for granted. So sure, maybe I had a hard life, but I'm alive, and thank God. And now look how good it is.
Right. Yeah.
Another thing I believe about Warren Jeffs, for example, is I think he truly loved his family. I don't think that it can be complicated because he did some bad things.
Right.
But I wouldn't say that he didn't love his family.
That's how I would look at my dad too, looking back on it now.
Mm-hmm.
When I first kind of woke up, I was so pissed off and so mad at him, you know. But then I also look and, you know, you see how hard he worked and how much he helped people. He would, being the leader and being in charge of all of the business aspect, the personal life aspect, everything, the religious aspect. He was in charge of all of that for the whole group. And people would come to him all the time. I need your help to figure out this problem with my son. This one's having a hard time. What do I do with this business? And like I don't know if there was ever a time when he wasn't talking to someone till like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning every single day.
Yeah.
And he gave his life.
Yeah, people are very, very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the modern world, we like to look at people and say every part of them was horribly evil, and these guys are all bad, and they're all after money, and they just wanted to control all the women.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps there's truth and there's aspects of it that are really bad, but at the same time, these are very complicated people, and oftentimes they view the world very sincerely, and they really want to do good, or they truly believe the doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people come along and take advantage of it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been very eye-opening to me to see how people can rearrange history. And it makes me look back at every other person
Mm-hmm.
in the history and say, what really happened there?
Did you guys have that in the FLDS where they would write down and record all the history and everything that happened and have like personal histories, group histories, things like that?
Or, you mean our current history or the past history? Because
of your current time.
Yeah, so the prophet kept the history,
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't really something that we all studied. But the recent past history, like the prophets before, Warren Jeffs compiled books
Mm-hmm.
about the line of authority and essentially wrote all those things.
Yeah.
The thing about Warren Jeffs is he was this pretty crazy guy that kind of got really weird
Mm-hmm.
as time went on.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there wasn't. That doesn't mean he didn't have good intentions.
Yeah.
But good intentions aren't good.
Yeah.
And that also doesn't mean there wasn't anything bad or that he had no bad intentions. He's just a complicated person. And Joseph Smith's a complicated person.
Yeah.
And every president of the United States is a complicated person. Every business owner is a complicated person. Everybody's a complicated person.
Oh, yeah.
And we all have really good and bad traits, and we'd like to just take somebody and say they're totally evil.
We try and put people in a box. You're in the bad box and you're in the good box because we want to separate them, you know. We want to know who's who.
Yeah, and the truth is there's probably a good and bad box in everybody.
Yeah, I think so too.
I know there is in me.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things that kind of... So when I first started to see some of this information, people started saying, wait a minute, Joseph was fighting polygamy and Joseph this and that. And I was like, no way. But then I was looking, and we, in our group, we keep like personal histories.
Do you have a group?
The Kingston group.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So before I had left the group,
Yeah.
we have the order history, we have the history of my dad and my uncle's history, and we would write down like our life stories. And then you would hear stuff in church, and somebody would tell someone else's history from their point of view, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most of this is right, but wait, this part is different because you know the person yourself. And so when I started seeing that, and I started realizing, okay, when people write down history, that's coming from their point of view. It's not necessarily what's right and what's true.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this is what this person thought, and this is what that person thought. And so then when I started seeing all this Joseph Smith stuff, I'm like, wait a minute, has this really changed? Or is this the way it actually was? And so then I start seeing these records where you can see that they changed this particular document. Here's the copy, and they changed these words. And then here's the final draft, and it says the opposite of what the first thing said. And it's like, oh my heck. And then in the margin here, where they're copying and changing, it says by instruction of Brigham Young. And it's something is not right.
I do understand what you're saying, and it's not that I don't give it a possibility.
Yeah.
But you also have to realize the gravity of what you're saying. If what you're saying is true, then Brigham Young was an absolute gangsta, man. I mean, he was a genius with a high IQ if he really did that.
Right.
And the other thing that you got to realize is the whole LDS church is founded, if that's true, the whole LDS church is founded by Brigham Young, not Joseph Smith, even though he used some of the things from Joseph Smith. But I have to say that's one of those things that just sounds way too good to be true. And also all the history of the last 200 years supports Mormonism, and to think that Brigham Young was really the one that established everything is a wild theory, man.
Yeah, it's so crazy. If you want, if you want to dig into it, there's several podcasts. There's the Joseph Smith papers themselves.
Well,
so
see, I don't have time to do it like a historian. Right. What I would like to see is if something like that is true, a good historian could take a look at it, an unbiased one, and say this and this really did happen. These are facts. Yeah. We know this happened. We know this was written. And if this theory is true, I would expect it to come out over a period of time.
I think it will too. There's some conferences coming up that people are putting on showing both sides of this argument. And they're like, okay, this is what I learned here. This is what I learned here. This is what I read here. People are starting to present this, and so it's going to be so interesting to see what comes out, what comes of all this stuff.
Yeah, that's a wild theory, man.
I mean, could you imagine the challenge to the LDS authority?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Brigham Young actually made his own church, and it's the opposite of what Joseph Smith's church was.
That's one of the reasons why I'm questioning this whole thing, because if the LDS was holding these documents, I don't think they put out something to destroy themselves. And I also don't think that they were ignorant about what was there.
Yeah, it would take a lot to go through and read all this stuff. And maybe, there's, out of the entire volume of all this stuff they released, probably 10% or less is all these details about what Joseph fought against polygamy and the things like that. And the 90% of it is like just history of this happened this day, and this happened this day, and this happened this day. And so you'd have to read through thousands and thousands and thousands of these documents, and then you'd find, oh, wait a minute, something don't match here. Oh, wait a minute, something over here is opposite too.
So you feel like it was a very subtle process that Brigham Young put in place.
It seems like, and there's things that we can see that were changed 2 years before they killed Joseph that made it so that the succession of the prophet would be different than what it originally was intended to be. You can see that they actually changed some of the records and some of the revelations. Some of the DNC stuff or things have been changed. And it was by Willard Richards and Brigham Young and Heber Kimball.
Willard Richards and John Taylor got shot. Willard Richards didn't, but
John Taylor did, yeah.
But they were there, and John Taylor got shot.
Yeah. Have you ever seen this documentary called Who Killed Joseph Smith? It's a full-length 2-hour documentary that a guy made this movie when he was an LDS member, and when he released it, then they excommunicated him.
Really?
But it'll blow your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You should watch it.
Yeah, I'm open to watching anything.
Yeah.
But I also am anxious to make sure that we can verify things.
Yeah.
And I understand that the history is written by the winners, but we still need to not jump to a conclusion. Another thing I don't want to fall into is who's trying to change history right now?
Yeah.
And what are they putting out
What's
to
their
change
agenda?
history right now?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing the power that history has,
Yeah.
especially over something like a religion.
Mm-hmm. It is crazy. Yeah, it's so...
Because if the history isn't right about Mormonism, everybody's gonna...
Mm-hmm.
I mean...
all this stuff we went through is like, what?
Yeah, it's like, wait...
Yeah, it is so crazy. But yeah, that's just some of the things I've been learning over the past few years, and you know, having this relationship with the Lord, getting to know Him, having experiences with Him, learning stuff. I mean, oh man.
Yeah, it's a wild ride, and
Sure.
personally, I don't consider that I try to not dwell on spiritual or religious things too much, because I mean, I'm interested in them,
Yeah.
but I spent so much time thinking about them, and it's maxed out my brain, and so
Yeah.
I've taken a step back and just trying to have more of a good time. But I love hearing other people's stories, and I'm really glad that you came. And I think that the Kingston group is probably it's going to be fascinating where it heads with kind of the leadership ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it seems to me like none of these groups can get over 10,000 to 15,000 people, because they can't control a bigger group of people than that without someone that's more lenient and someone that has a little bit more common sense and doesn't have to have such strict control over everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And what I've seen that kind of looks like the future of the Kingston group is, I think that it's gonna, like when Paul dies or whatever happens, I expect that it will break into several smaller groups, because he's already dividing things up between he has 7 brothers. There's 7 of the brothers altogether in his mom's family.
Mm-hmm.
And he's giving them control or authority over this chunk of the church and that chunk of the church, and kind of already starting to separate things into pieces now.
Mm-hmm.
And I expect that when he dies, that it'll probably fracture into several different groups, because the brothers can't get along with each other, and their kids don't get along with each other, and there's infighting a little bit, and there's feelings between different families, stuff like that. I don't see it staying together.
The LDS church is fascinating in the sense that it's kept it together, and that's one of the reasons a lot of current members' arguments is the prophets have been guided right, and the Lord's guided them right to where that's why they've continued to grow and grow, and that's why they're right, and all these little factions are wrong. And in my personal view, these little factions hold closer to a lot of the original things that were taught, and the LDS church to me just doesn't make sense. It seems to me to be more like a business.
Yeah, that's exactly, and I think that's why it's successful, because it turned into a temple business, basically. Let's build a temple here. All the people that live in this area, they have to pay tithing to go in the temple, so this will keep them paying tithing. So if we build a temple here, we have this anchor for all these people to pay tithing. Okay, now where's the next place that has a lot of members that are pretty well off? Let's build a temple there too, so that they have an anchor, so that we just keep getting this money coming in, because those temples are money-making machines.
Yeah, and I think that the LDS church has leaders throughout its history that were more focused on the business side, and then you have leaders right after them that are more focused on the religious side. So you're going from leader that is more business minded and truly isn't that devoted into the religion, and then you go to a leader that is, and so it's a little bit of a blurry path to see why there's these different changes. But this idea that God is revealing all these modern changes to make everything more and more convenient is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so crazy, especially if you compare it to like Moses. You know how in the Bible, in Leviticus, then Moses writes down all these things. Okay, here's the laws. You can't eat this. You can't do this. You have to do these sacrifices. And he spells them all out exactly in detail.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's Moses and Leviticus, or Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, whatever. It describes all these things like right to the T.
Mm-hmm.
And then through the entire rest of the history of the world, nothing changes. Like,
yeah.
this is set in stone. This is how you do it. And it just stays the same. But then you look at the LDS Church, just the temple stuff, the endowment ceremony, I think that has changed like 150 times.
Yeah.
It used to be that you would like literally say the words, I would rather have my throat slit than to reveal these secrets. Or I'd rather have my stomach cut open and my guts spilled on the ground, my heart ripped out of my chest, rather than reveal these secrets.
Yeah.
And now they change it so you don't say the things, but you still make the motions. And then they change it so you just make the hand signals and you don't actually go like this across your throat or across your stomach. And they have little markings in their garments that symbolize those things, being your heart cut out and your stomach cut open and whatever. They have all these symbols, but they don't tell anybody what it's all about. And so they basically water it down a little bit less shocking, a little bit less shocking, a little bit less disturbing.
Yeah, I'm probably not as acquainted with the details on these temple ordinances as you are.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating how much the LDS, they need it to be more convenient, and it just seems like they're wanting to make it more and more popular, and they have. That's what they've done.
Right. So you see just a continual change. And people would probably say a slide into apostasy, but it's just a continual change. And yet in the Bible, the example from the Lord is here's the way it is, and it stays this way the whole rest of the world's history. So it's like, whoa, this isn't...
Yeah, the Bible is an interesting subject, but it is the Book of Mormon is fascinating because it does not seem to me like somebody on weed could have just written that thing up.
I still hold to the Book of Mormon being a good thing.
I don't especially have a view either way, but it's just when I look at the book and look at the stories in it, this guy had some creative energy.
And the narrative, the story, and the doctrine, basically here's how you find God, that doesn't change in the Book of Mormon either. It's like the same all the way through it. And to maintain it consistent, that would be...
Well, it has some really good lessons in there. Even right now, I could quote you a few verses from the Book of Mormon that if I think about for a minute, I'm like, that is really true, and that's a good lesson.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of arguments against the book, but I don't think the book in any way is bad. Whether it was made up or an actual book of some kind, I don't think the book is bad in any way, right? But is it true? That's one question.
Yeah, is it like an actual historical record?
And I don't think there's very much evidence that it is.
There's a lot that so this is part of the thing I dove into too, but there's a lot of theories or suspicion or things that people feel like has been suppressed and hidden. Evidence in the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian is like a huge museum where they keep artifacts and they keep stuff, and they says they found all these things and artifacts, and the Smithsonian has them and they won't display them, they hide them, keeping them out of people. I don't know if all that is like legitimate, but it seems like they have actually found quite a significant amount of stuff, artifacts and things, but it's being suppressed or hidden or not being publicized.
Well,
so
I'm hesitant to believe that there's just a bunch of stuff being hidden.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it isn't, but I'm open to any idea, but I like to be rooted in facts as much as I can.
For sure.
But also, I often wonder right now, what are people trying to do? I'm sure there's a lot of people just trying to live a good life and get by, but then there's other people that want to change things up and they want to start a new group or do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, but I think also, in fact, I've seen a lot of that in my past couple of years of studying. We found a bunch of people. We found a few people here and there on Facebook, and people around this area are like, "What do you think? Let's study this particular scripture." And then you find people, okay, that this one guy, he seems to be trying to organize another group. I don't think I want to be a part of a group. I don't want to be tangled up in someone else's thing again.
Oh, that would be crazy, man.
Yeah.
Hey, man, do you want to get together with me? Let's start anew.
Let's be another, what is it, Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow.
Yeah, let's get a group going, man. Hey, man, do you want a few more wives?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get this rolling.
And some people probably want that.
Yeah, some people want that.
I just want to find the truth, man.
I'm very interested in the truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder if history can only really be one way or the other, because no matter who writes it, it's going to be biased.
Yeah.
And if somebody else had written it, then it would probably be biased the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting the pure truth is really difficult.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you read all the different sides and different viewpoints, and then, okay, the actual real thing is probably somewhere in the middle, but it could be clear over here, too.
Yeah, and also, could there be a lot of truth to what somebody's saying about something, but there's also this other point of view that's very true.
Yeah.
You don't know what caused somebody to do something bad.
Right.
Was it something horrible that happened to them that made them do something bad?
That does seem to be the case on a lot of cases, too.
A lot of times, somebody was treated horribly, and they went through a lot of shit, and then they were gonna fight against it, and they end up making a group.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be all hell because they don't see the world as clearly as they should, and they have this weird view. But man, it's just a crazy history, and I think that the future is actually a lot cultier than we think it is. We like to think of the past as this culty time, and the future is going to be bright, and I do think the future's bright, but I think there's a lot of cults coming.
It probably is, and that's what the Bible says in the New Testament. Everybody's going to be saying, "Oh, there's Jesus, and there's Jesus, and there's Jesus." Don't fall for it.
What do you think about different religious communities, like Christian, that are just Christian? They're not Mormons or anything like that. There's all these different Christian communities, but they're just, a lot of them are just going along with everything in the world. They, like Mormons, they stick to more of a core way. And a lot of these Christians are just doing their thing. It's confusing. It's who's the boss over there? No, I guess there shouldn't be a boss, right? There shouldn't be a boss. I guess Jesus is, but what I mean is, it's kind of like there's so many different ways to see Christianity, and they don't agree with each other. And sometimes I wonder if Christianity is just another really good scheme for, just like Mormonism, but we're way farther down the chain.
Yeah.
And it's been 2,000 years, and there's no boss especially, and it's just a good scheme at the time that's managed to make it all the way to here. Genius in some sense, but why shouldn't I see it just like a watered down cult essentially, where it started out really strong, like maybe something like Mormonism, and now we get to where we are today?
Yeah, I think that's how Catholicism was. It started out and it's weird because Roman Catholicism, Romans were the ones in charge of the Jews. And so when Jesus comes and he creates this stuff, this religion or this way of living, then the Romans have their own thing.
Yeah.
And so they kind of like combine them and swoosh them together. and then it becomes this mixture of Jesus stuff and pagan idolatry or whatever you might want to call it. And it turns into Catholicism, and it was a way to control the people. It's like, in fact, I think that what is the guy's name? Constantine. he like made it the law. You have to believe this religion, because that would unite all of his kingdom, his empire. It would basically make so that each of these little chunks aren't fighting with each other. So he says, okay, everybody's Christian now.
Yeah.
But
that's wild.
Christian isn't actually what Jesus taught. It was actually the combination mushed together. So,
one of the weird things about Catholicism is their buildings and a lot of their architecture is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And their drawings, man, those are some beautiful drawings. And their ideas, even some of their ideas are really beautiful. And it does make you turn your head when you see all that. It's like, why is... Because a lot of other Christian denominations and things, they just are plain, they're simple. Their church buildings are simple. They have a cross up there. Yeah. But Catholicism, the traditions of it, and like the drawings, they're all similar. Mm-hmm. And there's this like theme to it. Yeah. But man, I wonder why it's that way.
I think it's originally the Roman belief of Zeus and all these Roman gods. And they basically just took the names off of them and changed them into Peter and Paul and the 12 apostles. And they just kept everything with a new name on it when they smushed it together with Christianity.
Yeah, I don't know the history very good, but you would definitely know more than I do. But it's just, that's one of the reasons why I look at Christianity and I just think it's great and there's a lot of good teachings, but... so is there in a lot of other places. Mm-hmm. And why? Because a lot of people think of Jesus Christ and they say, how dare you question him? But for me, that's the life I lived for 20 years. Right. And now I think I'm going to question everything. Mm-hmm. And if something's true, it's not going to mind being questioned. Right. And so Christianity kind of seems to have some of these cult-like tendencies about it. Right. And it just seems like we're way down the chain and it's all watered down, but people need something. So, and it's weird because Christian nations have brought the world to the modern peace that we have, but the history of that is wild. I mean, it's blood. A lot
of blood and fighting and killing, and you're going to believe because I said you are, like type of thing, you know? It's like, we're going to fight and kill you so you believe.
Yeah, and in that sense, it's like maybe we are just a bunch of monkeys that are getting pretty smart.
And I think it's more of a lot of it that we are sheep and we want to have someone to follow.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever herded sheep on your farm or anything.
Yeah, I have.
But you notice how they always like to stay together.
Right.
They always love to huddle.
Yeah.
If you try and push them and they go around in a circle.
Yeah.
If you put something in there to lead them, then they'll just follow you wherever you go.
Yeah, the term sheep.
We're sheep.
Yeah, we are sheep. Most people are sheep, and it's astonishing the lack of ability people have to truly think for themselves. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is even a really independent thinker sometimes has a real struggle thinking for themselves because in their independent think group, they like to fit in, and they saying something that's entirely out of line with that group is hard.
It is. That was the hardest thing for me, is because I want to have my family. I want to be friends with them. I want to associate and do all this stuff. But when I'm like, wait a minute, when he beat up his daughter, that's not right. You know?
Yeah.
I speak up. It's, then everyone, you're one of those people. You're questioning. Yeah, but wait a minute. It's not right.
Yeah, you can't think for yourself. You can't ask questions. Yeah. That's the single biggest red flag in any place. Right. If you can't ask questions, you're headed towards hell, man.
Oh, yeah. The funny thing is in the Bible, it says, I think it's Isaiah, it says, "Come to me and ask me, reason with me, and I will show you my reasoning. I'll explain things to you."
Yeah.
God literally says, "Come and talk to me, question me, bring all these things up." And that's how he wants it, but we are always taught, oh no, you can't question God.
Yeah, another reason why I've been skeptical of Christianity is if you go look at these young men and young women that are in Christianity, and I guess I just say young because I haven't done too much with the older ones.
Yeah.
Because I've dated a few Christian girls, and so I just got some insight into how they think. And it's just fascinating to me that they are so into it and devoted. And it reminds me a lot of a Mormon situation, maybe in a different way. And the ideas are more open, but they're very passionate about it. And it seems to me that blinds them from seeing potential problems and other things. It makes the world beautiful in some way, but it also blinds, every religion does, but it also blinds you to not see things as they really might be. Yeah. And so I've been really hesitant, and I'd love getting caught up into something like that and being but I also hate it because I know what it can do, and I know that you can get so delusional and go places that you don't want to go.
Yeah, it enslaves you too, yeah, for sure.
That's wild that you still believe in Joseph Smith, man. I don't mind it. It's fascinating, and it will be interesting to see how the Mormon Church kind of plays their cards over the next 100 years. To see if the organization continues to increase, because the internet's getting so open. Yeah. But also just the United States and everything. It's just going to, as always, we're in a very interesting time. Like every point in history was interesting. But right now we're in a time where it's changing so fast. Yeah. Probably faster than previously.
Yeah, just the technology, computers and whatever is changing. Robots, automation, new stuff coming up, and then things in history are being revealed. All this stuff that, oh man, we didn't know about the Joseph Smith papers. We didn't know about this history of the Catholics. We didn't know about this. It's so crazy. Things are coming out.
And this idea that humanity is above tyranny and above dictators, and that the President of the United States would never, ever secretly murder somebody or have them murdered. Like, this idea that we're all great people is just
civilized,
extremely delusional.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that we've reached such a degree of peace, but at the same time, we're not that far away from bloody mess either.
Yeah. If you lost power, or if you lost grocery stores or something, oh my heck. Yeah,
we're not that far away from pretty bad stuff happening. And we're also, people are learning more, and the power concentration is getting insane. I mean, with technology, and after robots and everything, power concentration is going to get crazy, man. Who knows what the future is? It wouldn't be very hard for somebody to totally take control of the population.
Yeah, could you imagine building some kind of AI system where it tells people the news that you want them to see, and it has like video and everything, and it has nothing to do with reality. It's just the story you want to tell to make people do something.
Yeah, I mean, AI in that sense is terrifying. Yeah. And it's great that we've been able to keep the internet open, and so far it's been a net positive. And I hope it continues on that path.
Right.
But, man, with the concentration of power, I wouldn't be surprised if we have some crazy wars in the future that are weird, that are totally non-conventional and in a whole different way.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we don't, actually.
Yeah. No kidding. Is there anything else you want to say before we
Well,
end?
Not a whole lot. We've covered a lot of interesting stuff, and yeah, take a look at that movie, Who Killed Joseph Smith. And then there's a couple of podcasts if you want to see what people are learning and putting out. 132 Problems is an interesting one that digs into the issues of the LDS Church and polygamy. There's one that's called Still Mormon, like I'm still a Mormon.
Okay.
And this guy he's working with the guy that made the movie Who Killed Joseph Smith, and so it's pretty well produced presentations of this original documents and stuff, and blowing the lid off of the things that are being like, oh yeah, we used to think this, and here's what the original documents show. It's insane.
Okay.
I can text you links to these podcasts or something.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, it's been an exciting conversation.
Yeah.
Glad you came, man. Thanks for traveling over here, and I'm just trying to learn more. I'm just trying to understand the world and comprehend what really has happened. And once you have the lid blown off in one place, then the lid's blown off everywhere, and there's not anything you can do to recontain it.
Yeah.
And the more people that see that, the better it is.
I think so. Yeah, definitely.
And just watching what's going on in the world right now, and seeing people argue in ways that they're so stuck up on their point.
Yeah.
It's wild, because it's like, you don't realize you're just as brainwashed as somebody that's in this cult over here that you think is crazy.
Right.
You're just as brainwashed, and you can't see it.
Absolutely, man. It's so pervasive throughout the whole world.
Yeah, it's human nature, and the people that truly have an open mind are actually pretty rare. Most people are going along with what the religion and people and group that they're in feels like they should do, and they're going to stay that way unless some crazy pain comes along and forces them to change. And I'm no different. It takes a lot of pain for me to change my views and change my perspective. And one of my goals is to make so that I don't have to get so into such a bad place before I do change.
That is so cool. If you could figure out how do I accept something that's true without being beat down first.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's the thing.
Yeah, because that's hard. You have to be beat before you'll change.
Yeah.
It's crazy how we don't want to accept reality, and we don't want to accept change, and especially when it's controversial or it doesn't align with something that everybody else agrees with.
Challenges what we think we're built on, our foundation or whatever. Ooh, no.
Oh yeah, if you challenge, that's why it's so hard to leave these religious groups.
It is. Yeah, when you're born there and you're raised there and everything in your whole life has always been that way, then someone says, oh, look at this over here. You're like, nope.
Yeah.
I don't want to look.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yep. Well, thank you. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Awesome
Do you do anything publicly or?
I'm on Facebook and I chat with people.
John Tucker.
Yeah, John Tucker.
Okay.
So.
Cool. It was awesome meeting with you. Thanks for chatting. Thanks everybody for joining us. Come back for more good interviews like this. Peace out.
Yeah.